All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to call this meeting to order. Today is Thursday, June 6th. It is 9:02 a.m. All council members are present, including the town attorney, town manager, and town clerk. If you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we start, we got a couple of things we need to talk about before we get going. First, I want to publicly apologize to Sarah. I was a little hard on you on Monday, so my apologies. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. I want to introduce somebody. We've hired a planner, a principal planner, Judith Frankel. As you can see, she's live. Judith, you're on TV all the way around this room. We'll get you off of there soon. But Judith worked with me. I hired her in Surfside, and she recently became available, and she applied for the position, and she's AICP certified. She's actually served on our LPA there, and I poached her from that and pulled her closer to the government, and she brings a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of background information and in the industry, and it's really good to have her. And she met with staff, and staff has interviewed her. She's already spoken with Sarah at length and Frankie at length, and obviously I've known her for 3 or 4 years, so it's a good fit for us. She fits the team very well, so I just want to introduce her this way virtually, and she'll be here Monday and Tuesday, and it'll be kind of hybrid. She'll be doing some remote work and work here and back and forth. So we're really excited to have her on staff.
Thank you and welcome.
Welcome.
You want
Welcome.
to say a few words? Can she hear us?
Can't hear.
Hold on, we can't hear you.
Hold on one sec. We need to get the volume. Is that?
Yep. Go ahead.
Try again.
No.
No.
Still not up.
Barely.
We can hear you, but just barely.
Hold on.
Try it again.
Good morning.
Now we can hear you.
Okay. Good morning. I'm excited to be here virtually and be there in person next week, and I'm excited to get started. I've started reaching out to the staff to get up to speed and familiar with all of the projects and things going on. So I'm mostly just here today to listen and learn.
Well, welcome aboard. Forward to meeting you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judith.
Vice Mayor, you have something you'd like to?
Just a quick update. I had a request from Senator Scott's office to convey this to my colleagues, and this is really the only forum where we can really communicate with each other. So we were at the Senator's press conference talking about hurricane preparedness, and I ran into Aaron, his staff person, and I asked her for an update on the post office, and I have not been able to get any information as to why it's still not open here on Fort Myers Beach. And she reached out to her federal contacts and said that she wanted me to convey to everyone and the public that they had some challenges with the floor when they were renovating the building, and that floor needs some serious work, and they hope to be done with that work on the first half of July. And if everything works out, checks out, they'll move in as soon as possible. She's guessing mid-August, and then she kind of made a joke that federal government, so you may want to add another month to that, but at least there is. I know there's been a lot of curiosity about why that building is not still open, and I hope that gives people just a little bit of background. Thank you.
All right. Our first item for discussion is a review of weekly/monthly rentals. Who's starting this one? Who's Scott? I believe this was you that.
Yep.
No, it's actually me.
Karen. I'm sorry.
No, it was actually me that brought this up, and it stems from a lot of discussion that I get questions on from our constituents about why is one side of my street weekly, the other side monthly? Where did all these come from? A lot of questions about, have we lost our grandfathering for rentals because we haven't been able to rent? And I know that's on part of the discussion as well. But just given everything with Hurricane Ian, just wondering if there is a time to review this, and there couldn't be a better time to review it and finally put it to rest as to why the change, why the monthly rentals, why the weekly rentals, where do we really want to be as we move forward? Is this an opportunity to change it if we want to do that? Or just to open up some discussion around it? Because there's a lot of background discussion about it.
So let me add, I've got about five points I want to talk about. Number one is the language of the original ordinance that was written around 2000 that's antiquated, it's ridiculous. It states, and I state that you can only rent to people that are blood relation. That is one of our ordinances. And we, in 2018, they tried to change it. They couldn't change it because they're going to lose their grandfather status. So I'll get into that here in a minute. But so I've got 4 women checking into one of my places today that are here for a bachelorette party. Under the ordinance, I'm breaking the rules. I don't know how in the United States of America we can have an ordinance that you pick and choose what part of the ordinance you're going to follow. It's antiquated and it needs to be looked at harshly, because if you have a same-sex couple check in, they're not blood related, you're breaking the ordinance. So I think we need to take a real hard look at that. The other thing with weekly versus monthly is there's nobody really knows if the monthly is 28 days, if it's a calendar month, if somebody checks in March 15th and leaves April 15th, can you rent the rest of April? Nobody really knows. The weekly streets, is it once a week? Is it 7 days? It has to be 7 days. No one really knows. As Karen mentioned, the grandfather status, that's a whole nother deal. We had houses that were weekly, and now that they were destroyed, is that when they rebuild, will they still have the weekly designation? I don't know, because they were supposed to pay, a fee to keep that status up there. So we're getting a lot of emails of people that just don't know the status of their house. It's tough for the realtors when they're selling a place. They just don't know.
Just real quick on that, Scott, if you don't mind, the last 2 points we've talked about before you were on council, and I think it might have been before John and Karen, we had talked about those 2 points. The second point, it was made very clear, at least of my recollection, that whatever you had before the storm, you will be able to get back after the storm. That's what was talked about.
It?
Well, my understanding, according to the attorney, is that's the previous attorney. That's the way they interpreted but it was the intention of the council at the time to make sure that whatever they had before the storm, we certainly understood that, people were displaced or the houses were wrecked, and the timeliness of getting their application back in was going to be an issue. So before the election, there was discussion about that. If Jim, do you remember? I believe we had that discussion about making sure if you had the weekly, if you didn't get your application in time, they'd still be honored to do that. They wouldn't lose their status of that.
Okay.
And then the other point, refresh my memory. I'm sorry, you had 3 in a row. The second one you said.
So the grandfather, number one was the language of the original ordinance.
Yeah, so that was discussed again. That was way before the storm. It was the 30 days was from the 1st to the 30th, because that's what brought this up the last time, was the discussion about, well, what's 30 days? Is it,
It's actually 28 days.
well, what is it, if I rent it on the 15th, does that mean then till the 15th of the next month? Is that 30 days? And we were told, no, it's from the 1st of the month till the end of the month. That's how they were doing it, or that's how it's the calendar month versus, because that was the argument we were making before, is why do we care if 30 days is a rolling 30 days? So, especially in the middle of the summer, if you've got 2 weeks rented in July, or you've got a week in the end of July and they want to carry it over to the week in August, now you've lost both those months. So that was the discussion. And that's actually what prompted it to be sent up to the AG's office for an opinion, And they told us if you change one word, you'll lose your grandfather status. So I think that, and maybe Becky can opine on this. I know that he sometimes had a different interpretation of, but this was actually sent up to the AG to review about the 30-day thing.
Yeah, I think there just needs to be a lot of clarity right now with, the realtors are trying to sell, the houses, the vacation rental companies. We want to play by the rules. We want to know what the rules are. So I think and we're not having a discussion if we should change the whole island to weekly. We can have that discussion. Nothing's going to be decided today. We're just having a, open discussion. What I also want to talk about, though, Mayor, is that in 2018, when they started charging for short-term rentals, they came up with this phone number nonsense. The phone number never worked. It hasn't been in service since the storm. I still don't know why that was even passed, because that's what we have the sheriff for. And then the other thing is what the money was supposed to be set aside for workforce housing. Now I look at the budget and I see short-term rentals as a line item. Are we holding that money, or is that part of the general fund? Maybe Joe can answer this. Do we really want to save this money for workforce housing, or?
Well, the original fee was set up to cover just the costs, the admin costs.
Right.
And then I think it was 2020 or 21, whichever it was, at the last minute, it was brought up that we're changing this to that $300 thing.
Right.
And that money, the additional money, was to go towards workforce housing. We've since repealed that, as far as or at least the per bedroom part of it.
That was
still 300.
Yeah. So there's just so much, we just don't know. And maybe we can get Joe up here in a little bit to say where that money's going, what's used for. Is it actually being applied to workforce housing, or is it in a separate silo? I don't know. And that's, we should have an open discussion about this. And finally is the condo. There's this condo opt out. I really think the condos should just be a separate, they've got their own HOAs. They've got their own rules. They know what they're doing. I don't know why our ordinance is on top of them and they even have to go through this opt out process. I think they should just be, all of them should be opted out and they can make their own decisions. We need that discussion.
I was under the impression that they were their own entity and that each condo it's made its own rules.
No, they still have to opt out.
Yeah.
Well, they have to opt out.
Yeah.
Why do we even make them opt out?
No, I don't disagree. I guess I didn't know that. I thought I'm just under the impression that they were all their own entities and could make their own rules as they go.
So those are the five or six things I'd like to talk about. Number one, and I defer to you. We've got an ordinance that nobody's doing anything about. That's antiquated. That, quite frankly, is a little risky because the verbiage in there. So can we amend it? And if we amend it, what happens? And I just got a lot of questions about that.
Okay, if I can just kind of bring y'all up to speed on what's going on in Florida law on this. In 2019, there may have been a request by Fort Myers Beach. The one that was actually answered, what did come out in Attorney General's opinion, and I'm looking for it here. It was sent to Crystal River. And that's not infrequent when there is a subject matter that is hotly, considered. There can be multiple requests that go up to the Attorney General. They respond to one of them. But the Crystal River response basically says you can't change anything in your regulations, whether it's less restrictive or more restrictive, either one, without basically losing your grandfather position. So that made everybody just want to freeze their ordinances in time. There have been numerous statutes that have been proposed in the legislature over the last several years, none of which were actually passed by the legislature. And each one of those had a provision that said, if you are making it less restrictive, you don't lose your grandfathering. That is also true of Senate Bill 280, which that's in 2024, that has not made it to the governor's desk yet. It was passed by the legislature, but there has been an effort by a lot of municipalities and counties to get it vetoed by the governor. But it hasn't made it to his desk yet. And that one does have a provision that says if you make it less restrictive, then you do not lose your grandfathering. But right now, we can talk about it, but we would not be able to make any changes in our vacation rental ordinance unless we're willing to lose the ability to regulate vacation rentals. So I wouldn't recommend that.
But how do you have that section in there saying you have to rent to blood people that are blood relations?
And running to blood relations doesn't even make any sense, as you pointed out. Well, married couples aren't blood related. They better not be.
Did you hear that, Andy?
But anyway,
But how
Maybe in Tennessee.
How do you have a law? How do you have an ordinance that you pick and choose what piece you?
there are, and it's kind of interesting when Muni Code codifies things, they will, if they see something that is unconstitutional, they will put a footnote that something's been removed, but you can ignore.
So I actually think it's unconstitutional.
Yeah, I mean, that's, and I agree. I mean, blood relatives means you can't bring your adopted daughter.
Yeah, you can't.
I mean,
Four guys coming down to play golf. You can't do it.
No, exactly. And so I think we could, with impunity, ignore that sort of thing because it is not legal to enforce it. So I think we're okay on that. I'm just very hesitant to say that we should make them all weekly, even if you really want to make them all weekly. Now's not the time to do it. If 280 gets signed, or if it goes into effect without the governor vetoing it, because he doesn't have to sign it, then the gloves are off. We can change it as long as it does not become more restrictive. We just can't at this point. I think what is time sensitive about this particular discussion is that the applications for vacation rentals are due now. And I think people are very, very concerned that their house was wiped out. And there is a provision that if you don't do it every year, basically, and have proof that you rented it, that you can't go forward with it.
Becky,
Now,
is there something that administratively, like we did before, that we can just direct staff that?
Absolutely.
We
can. We are under a state of emergency still.
Okay. That's what I wanted to get at. I don't want anybody to lose what they had before.
Absolutely. And because we are, and that's one of the reasons, one of the many, many, many reasons we are continuing to continue the state of emergency. That gives us certain powers over our ordinances. And that would be a very reasonable thing to do. And it would, you could do it by resolution. You could make a finding that, people lost the homes. It wasn't their fault. They didn't intentionally stop using it. And that, there can be an administrative directive to staff to process the registrations and to, go forward as if the places were not, destroyed.
Well, I would support drafting a resolution to codify that. Because
Sure.
then if that way, if the state of emergency ends, we now have the resolution that we could fall back on to
Sure.
continue that should the state. Okay.
Absolutely.
I would support that.
I
Yeah,
would too.
I would as well.
Okay.
Could we also do a resolution for the condos that they could stick by their association bylaws and not have to go through this opt-out program?
Sure. We could do that. I don't see a
would
problem
support
with
that
that.
resolution as well.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I didn't know there was a process they had to go through.
make it an automatic opt-out.
Automatic, yeah. And just to have them go by their own association bylaws.
Okay, and we can put some whereas clauses. I mean, obviously, this was not the top thing on Condo's list of things to do after the storm.
Right, exactly.
So,
But now they're
you know,
starting
this is
to get
making
back.
it, yeah, this is making it a little easier.
Well, as they're getting
on
back
them.
in, they're sharing the same concerns to Karen and Scott's point.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, okay, I can prepare both of those resolutions for your next meeting.
That would be great.
Well,
On the
okay.
17th?
Yes. Yeah, because you're off the following month, so
Right.
definitely needs to be before then.
And then I heard from a number of people, I know we used to send out these notices and billings and everything for renewal of short term, and no one has seen them yet. And I don't know where we are with that, or if they should just, or how, how do you want this to look?
So we have reached out. There's a number of people that have called in and talked to me that they haven't received them. And what we've done is we just process them like if they had gotten it. So a few of the emails that we gotten, one yesterday, a lady who normally gets it like in April, and all of a sudden she didn't hear anything. June 1st they're due, and she panicked. And we're facilitating all those people that did not receive one, just have them call in, and we will take care of it and treat it like it never happened.
And who did they talk to, Frankie, or where did they call in?
Patty Provost is our head of short-term rentals.
Could you spell her last name so everybody has it?
You were going to ask.
Provost.
Yes.
Oh,
There was an
okay.
E in there, but
Like
yeah.
the what?
But you got to add the E at the end, right?
No, not
No,
potato.
there's no E on there,
Yeah,
right?
no, we're not spelling potato.
Something
Um,
to see at colleges.
But yeah, and so she's the head of short-term rentals. I had a
Okay.
discussion with her a couple days ago about this because she had people calling already. And again, we're treating them just like they had received the letter, and we'll accommodate any way we can.
Okay, great.
To that, there is a side note, and that is some of these properties that.
Her email address is actually different.
Is it
It's patty@fmbgov.com.
Oh, there we go.
Is that with a
Thank
Y
you,
or
sir.
I?
PATTY.
We've had a few of these properties that have been obviously wiped away from Ian, or the structure was such that the property owner demolished the property through a temporary use permit. They had a trailer put on the property. Several have asked if they could use those as short-term rentals.
No.
Those do not qualify, and we tried to explain there. We're more than willing, as far as community development department, we're more than willing to work with these people if they're building back. We can revisit that at that point, not threatening to take away any kind of status or anything like that. Again, you have to understand the situation that everyone has been through over the last 2 years, and we are definitely taking that into consideration.
Perfect. Thank you.
So Scott, you want to kind of go, it sounds like your first bullet point.
The language seems to be taken care of. Thank you.
Well, I don't know that we can until that's
Well, no,
passed, right?
she said we can ignore it because it's unconstitutional.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, but I
Yeah,
meant as
the-
far as physically
the
changing
blood
it in the ordinance. we
relative.
can't
Right, well, no,
physically.
Yeah,
she-
we won't
she
change
answered
it in the
Okay.
ordinance. Yeah.
It's okay. That gives some clarity because I keep getting asked that all the time.
Do we know when, I know you said it's sitting on DeSantis' desk. Do we have any idea, or does he just,
Usually everything has to be done by July 1st, right? Jim? Yeah.
Well,
July.
but if he does nothing, then it goes into law. He doesn't have to sign bills. So he either signs it, doesn't sign it and goes into effect, or he
or
vetoes
he
it.
vetoes it?
And I know that a lot of cities are requesting him to veto it.
Yeah,
Good luck.
they've been
Because-
trying for years to sneak this in and take away home rule.
Oh, absolutely.
And Florida League of Cities, and we're part of that, of pushing back very, very hard, because this is just the first step. It's the first step of getting the foot in the door. And, once it goes back to state control,
Oh, yeah.
it's not good for anyone.
So before we get into weekly, monthly discussion, if I could ask Joe, there's still some confusion that money was supposed to go to, as the mayor pointed out, to administrator of the program. Then we heard it was going to go to workforce housing. What's your take on this right now?
Could I interrupt on this?
Sure.
With regard to, this is a regulatory ordinance. Under Florida law, regulatory ordinances, should the amount of it needs to be capped at the cost of the regulation. Otherwise, it becomes a tax. And you can lose your ability to assess that because we do not have the ability to assess more taxes. Now, from what I understand, y'all are charging $300. That's a pittance. I'm surprised that it's that low. The other cities that I represent that are coastal cities, it's much higher than that because they go through a very rigorous analysis to determine how much time, for instance, staff time, attorney time, because you do pay me, you don't pay me by the hour, but you definitely pay me. So that all those things need to be put together to come up with the amount of the regulatory cost, but we can't go over that. What you do with that money, because that money would go into the general fund, what you do with it to allocate it someplace else is, whatever you want to do. You can either
Do we actually
pay
know
for the cost.
Well, Joe could probably
Yeah.
tell us a little better what the
Cost.
yeah.
Good morning, Joe Wanzik, Finance Director. I was just trying to find all this information for you. I know we started out the year to the end of 2022 with about $100,000 that had been accumulated. That was specifically, I think the way it worked originally was that there was a $50 fee originally, and then there's $250 added to it, and that additional $250 was to be set aside for workforce development. And so in that initial implementation, there was like about $110,000 that was collected with that understanding. So that's still sitting there with the earmark for workforce development. I was just trying to see if I could figure out 2023, but there was discussion, and I know in my presentations, I had explained what the actual cost of running the program was, and the amount of money that we were collecting actually just barely covered the cost of the program. I think if it was like it cost 97% of what we were collecting was the actual cost of the program. And so there was discussion as to whether we should only put the amount that would be left over after funding the cost of the program into workforce development. But I'm trying to find if that was actually codified into the resolution to do that. But I know that was proposed. But if I can find where it was codified in the resolution that only the amount remaining would be going to workforce development, I think it would be about $50,000 possibly last year for 2023, but this is just an initial assessment. The final figures aren't.
So Joe, are you saying the $300 amount is just barely covering the cost of the program?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you were talking about the 50 or the 300.
The 300.
The 300. Okay.
At least according to the budget we had for 2024 and the number of rentals that were expected then. So the fee versus the number of rentals and the cost of the program in that context would just barely cover it.
Because I want to, if memory serves me right, Vice Mayor, maybe you can help out with this because there's been a lot that's happened. I seem to remember that the discussion, we were both caught off guard because there was no previous discussion about the change. And then that it also went along with the parking fee increase from the $3 to the $5. And that money also was supposed to but my understanding is it was to go into the general fund, then it could be used for a workforce housing program. I don't know if it was ever codified in the ordinance that it would be specifically for that, but if you could find it, that'd be great.
I can look for that. I was not aware of that, but I certainly can look for that.
Is that your recollection of kind of how it went?
Well, like you say, it was kind of put before us last minute, and there was very little public input, if I remember correctly. And I believe the parking increase was not only for workforce housing, but I think there was also an attempt to allocate some of those proceeds to a parking app that would help people find a parking spot on the island, if I remember correctly. But
Yeah,
I'm
that's-
a little gray on it.
There was a lot of, but it was very vague and there was not a lot of certainties as to where funding was going to go. So if you could, anything you could find would be helpful.
Well, I think that's just generally the case in the general fund, is that the revenues just come in and they're like, so parking revenue does go into the parking department, and then into that department are charged the specific expenses, like for the parking app, whatever. So you could take a look at that and see, do the comparison to see of revenue to expenses to see how we're doing in that respect. But it's not that that's the extent to which it's allocated. It goes to the department where the expenses are.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, as I get the cobwebs out of my brain, I think the parking piece, if the proponent of the parking piece advocated that those funds be used for the parking app and other general needs that we had, because I think at that time we were looking at lighting and beach renourishment,
Yeah.
community policing.
Yeah, because remember we pushed back on using it specifically for one item.
I think that's right. Yeah.
And we'll get there.
So you mentioned, Joe, that the $300 fee is barely covering the cost of the program based on what rentals we have now. So if we have more rentals at 300, does that make it even worse that it doesn't cover? Or is it the same amount of staff and everything else? We just have more rentals and therefore we have more income coming in and more excess.
Well, just off the top of my head, I would suspect that we would have more excess, but we would have to actually do the math and talk to staff to see, well, how much more time would they need to spend if the volume were to increase, and just do that calculation. But I think because the numbers were low for the budget for 2024, that's why it was just barely break-even situation. I think if the numbers were to increase, you would start to see a bigger excess amount.
So I think it'd be interesting to know, like, because we are on the brink now of people getting back into the short-term rental business and their houses are ready. So if it's a 10% increase, if it's a 20, if it's a 40, what would it mean for that fee? And I'm also curious because you said most coastal towns are much higher than that.
Yes, and the reason for that is I am normally asked, of course, we haven't been here that long, but I'm normally asked, what percentage of my time is spent on items relating to short-term rentals. And frankly, in Fort Myers Beach, it's significantly less than it might be in Anna Maria or in Cocoa Beach, where a significant amount of my time is spent on that. And they also allocate the time of the city manager, everybody in the staff, not just the people who work on that, because
Like code
they're-
enforcement and.
oh, absolutely. And the cost of having the code enforcement hearings, because I would guess you maybe wouldn't have as many code enforcement hearings if you didn't have it. But they look just universally, and also the cost of, I don't know if you use, computer software, an outside consultant to do the tracking, because that's expensive.
Yes, I think it's Granicus, I believe, is the software, and
Okay.
so it is.
I mean, there are a lot of things that go into
Yes.
it, and so the fees are higher.
And to be honest with you, we have not factored all of that in. I mean, basically, it was like more the cost of the software and the person who actually works in that department.
Yeah.
And that we did not factor in all the other costs.
And I would suggest that you factor in all the costs, because honestly, you're not supposed to charge anything more than your actual expenses. And the actual expenses include my time, city manager, Frankie's time,
So
all that.
then how did this workforce, if legally you can't charge more, then how did this workforce component even?
We know.
I have no idea.
Well,
That's why I think it was just a discussion about it could potentially be used for
Okay.
that. More than it was just specifically for that.
Once it lands in your account, you can do what you want to with it.
I think, though, in fairness to the record and to history, I think to Scott's point, this short-term rental increase was to be allocated specifically and only for, aside from the administrative cost, anything in excess of that was to be set into a separate fund for.
was that codified?
I don't know what to find out.
Yeah, I don't know how the attorney eventually drafted it or put it, the old attorney. I don't know how they implemented it or put it into practice, but that was the discussion and the intent of the author, if I remember correctly.
But I think it was done in September of 22, just before the storm.
Right.
Mm.
It was.
So it'd be fairly easy to find, I would think,
Mhm.
if it was codified.
Okay, I will certainly.
I'm pretty
look-
sure it was at the
look
2
that.
budget meetings is
Okay.
when the increase
It was.
happened, because
I watched them.
that's when the fee went from 50 to 300,
Mhm.
and then this whatever per room.
And then they wanted to add another $100 per room, which we took away in 23.
Yes.
But yeah, it was in the budget meetings of 2022.
I might add just one thing to Becky's point. Code enforcement in the past was lax island-wide. With our new certification staff and our larger staff that we have, enforcement will be going back to where it should have been and done properly. So that means more inspections. That means more people being held to be compliant. That may have either been teetering or may have had other situations. Not saying that we're going to go down with an iron fist, but we do have to be compliant as our relevant situation with FEMA. Things have to be documented properly. We have to follow the plan that the town had in place and agreed to with FEMA as far as building a new structure, making sure that structure follows certain guidelines. So that's where code enforcement is really going to step up its presence, not only in short-term rentals, but island-wide. But to the point of added fees, we never really added that portion, into that calculation before. It's definitely going to be a proponent of it moving forward. Cases going to magistrate, cases just being mediated, coming in and getting a permit, talking to the building official, getting those type of people involved to make sure a residence is safe, is compliant.
So Becky, how do you go about calculating that cost? I mean, if we're grossly undercharging for the service to operate the service, is that something that we need to look at?
I think I'd be happy to work with Joe, and because I'm aware of how they do it in other municipalities. Because there would be a discussion with me and with Andy and Frankie and other people on staff as to what percentage of their time is taken up, and then we know what salaries and overhead are for our different staff members, and we can figure out if 5% of their time is allocated to that, or if 35% of their time, whatever, we can make those calculations.
Well, I'd be interested in seeing that data just to see how it compares to where we're at now. If everybody else is okay with
I
it.
would love that.
I mean, I suspect it will be much higher. You can always charge less, but you can't charge more than the cost of the regulation.
So just to know how much it actually costs, and then we can make a decision
Right.
from there, would make
You have to
sense.
also look at how many, projected how many more vacation rentals
Right.
are going
Right,
come
and do it,
online.
that's what I said, add the 10% or 20 or 40 or whatever it would be, and see what that,
I think in that data gathering, it'd be nice to know where we were at the peak at 2022 before the storm versus where we're at now, to see what the shortfalls have been and what we could potentially be back to in the next couple of years.
right, the projections.
Okay.
And I do know that, for instance, in Anna Maria, that is part of their budget process. They bring forward, the analysis of what it is, and it's passed the resolution assessing the fees for vacation rentals is part of the budgetary process.
All right. Karen, Scott, anything in this first item?
Well, I think what I'd like to see is with this weekly, monthly definition, what exactly is a month, what exactly is a week. I'd like to see a roundtable with, stakeholders in the future, the short-term rental people, the people that want to protect their monthly rights. I think this discussion needs to be made. I think the big fear is that, we're going to turn into some of these islands that these corporations come in and buy up just a swath of land and build short-term rentals. I don't see that happening here. I mean, most of my clients are, people around my age that bought a property. They're not ready to retire yet, but they want to make some income until they make that move here. But I think we need to have this discussion. I think it's, I think it's a good time. I know we've got a ton of other stuff going on, but I think, the real estate market, the realtors need to we all need to be on the same page. The town, the short-term rentals companies, the realtors, we all just kind of need to be on the same page, what the definitions are, what's our view of the island going forward.
Yeah, I will agree. The definitions could be better laid out as, what a week and what a month is. But I honestly, I've heard more people objecting to changing monthly to weekly.
I didn't say we.
No, I know, but I don't know if
I'm
that was
not
part of the
saying that at
discussion.
all.
I just want to make sure that's not part of the discussion.
No. But I think we need to, first, let's see what the definition is.
No, I think that's important to.
And
be
those
very clear.
those interpretations of what does it mean by a month, you can pass that by resolution. That doesn't impact your ordinance.
But I think, we just, the five of us right now can't decide that. I think we need the vacation rental companies that have the experience. They know what their booking window is. They know what their average length of stay is. But you also have to realize that there are residents that specifically bought houses on monthly streets, and we want to protect their rights too. So I think we just need to have a forum where everybody can come together and let's work this out. I don't think it should be us versus them. I think we should all work together to come to, what the definitions are and what the ground rules are. And then I think most of the vacation rental companies on the island will, if they know what the rules are, they'll abide by them. But let's figure out what the rules are.
Well, I think, Becky, if you can go through the ordinance and give us an interpretation of how you read it. We had gotten one from our previous attorney as to how the ordinance reads, but I would be interested in hearing your interpretation to see if it aligns with his or if it's
Okay.
completely different.
Well,
No, the monthly's,
Yeah,
a
be-
really big deal because
the
it's-
monthly, I mean, I can tell you right now, I don't have a clue as to whether that means 30 days or does it mean
Calendar
just
month.
calendar month? I mean,
I thought
I don't know.
I thought that the AG opined on that too when it was sent up. I specifically remember John saying, because that was the big question about what is a month, and I want to say in that
I'll
opinion
research it and
that
see if
it
there's
came down from the AG specifically what it referred to.
okay.
But I could be wrong. But I want to say that because that was the big issue of sending it to the AG in the first place.
Yeah, I couldn't find that AG opinion. I figured that it was that 2019 opinion. Like I say, it's not unusual to have them just respond to one.
I
and-
did find one that John
Okay.
had sent back to us, but
Okay.
I don't know if it was. I'll have to send it to you. It was back a couple years ago, but
So it
I'll
was-
find it. And send it.
This is my point. We we really need to understand what the definition is.
Well, my point is that it was already asked and answered, and that's if we can find what the answer was before we go down another road to ask the same thing.
Well,
we
yeah,
already asked.
that's fair.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I just want to
Okay,
make sure that
sure.
because my recollection it was in there because that was the specific language that and the family. Those were the two things that were kind of the driver of finding out what the AG's opinion of, if I remember correctly. Those were the two main focal points.
Okay.
So if you can find it, that'd be great. I found it last night somewhere, or I should have sent it to you
So
then.
I've got one more thing. I know we've spent a lot of time on this, but it's been good discussion. And this is for Andy and Frankie. So we're supposed to have this phone number that people called and complained. And are we even doing that? Do we need this phone number? I mean, isn't that what the sheriff's for? Or
It depends on what you're complaining about. So, I mean, if you're,
Well, there was supposed to be. Now, again, I'm going under 2018, so my memory's, not there. It's 6 years ago. But the part of the ordinance was we were going to have a hotline that you call, and if there is a rowdy, and that's why when you fill out the short-term rental form, you list who the agent of record is or who the manager is, because you were supposed to have a phone number that you called, and somebody was supposed to answer that phone. So if somebody rents a house next to a neighbor and the neighbor complains, there was supposed to be a number you call, and then action was taken immediately. You guys look up who the person is responsible, and you called them. I don't think that's
I don't think that's ever happened.
well,
We don't know about
it hasn't been since we've been here. So,
Right,
and
so-
we just don't have the wherewithal to even do that. I don't know. how
Well,
that
I think it
functioned
went
in the
further than
past.
that, though. I think on the house, there was supposed to be something posted
Yeah.
with the phone number
Right.
to get a hold of directly the
Which never
agent.
happened either.
I mean, isn't that
I
what the
don't know.
police are for?
That's exactly right. The
Yeah,
non-emergent, we have to stress the
Now we're
non-emergency number unless it is an
if we
emergency.
got this
of the
800
SO.
number that you're
Yes.
supposed to call, and you guys are supposed to run us down. Now our cost just went up.
Yeah.
So
We can work on a communication plan to make sure that moving forward, or even the ones that are currently being done, people know that if they need to make an internal contact with staff, they can reach out to Patty during working hours. We do not have an off hour.
I'm telling you, the
phone
parties aren't going down during
Yeah,
working
yeah.
hours.
Right.
Yeah, no,
And then it's the
again, or
recount.
leave a voicemail for that, and then anything that's would be considered
I
bad
think,
behavior or things that they have to reach out to the SO.
if memory serves me, I think, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Scott, but I think the previous town manager hired a service, because I think this number had to be available. A human had to be available
Yeah.
24 hours a day.
Right.
The purpose, I think, was understandable in the sense that if there's a party at 3 a.m. or there's issues or non-emergency issues, at least you'd have a way to somehow get a hold of the owner of the property in some capacity. I'm not sure how efficient it
But
was.
looking at costs, Vice Mayor, that it's costly, and isn't that the function of the
Sheriff?
sheriff?
Yeah, I guess
Well,
so, but
to a
it's-
point.
to a point, I think. Yeah.
Either you do it or you don't.
Well,
And
no.
we had it on the books to do, and we weren't doing it.
No.
So-
I don't. I agree with you. If we're going to have it on the books, we ought to do it.
Right.
I think it's absurd that we're not doing it and then requiring people to have been putting
So
this number out there.
There's two questions. Do we do it? And if we're going to do it, let's do it.
Yeah,
I think
it's
I
worth
think it's been
discussing.
used. I've talked to several people that called that number.
Not
Yeah,
the last 2
I have
years.
staff
Well, no, of
just
course not.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
staff just reached out to me and they said that there is a hotline that is still being staffed or answered 24 hours a day. I asked who the contact person is, and they said the listing agent. So the number to contact would be with that.
yeah, I think they would call to the hotline, and the hotline would call directly to the agent and say there's been. a
right. So we're
reported
paying
issue.
for this right now. Do they know how many calls they've gotten? What it's costing us? Because
Well,
if we're
the
getting
person
one
I'm in
call a
contact with is
month-
no longer involved with this, but I mean, that's the plan that they had in place.
But we're still paying
I can
for
get that information to you.
Okay, that'd be great.
Well, technically, the short-term rentals are paying for it because that would be money that would come out of that.
Yeah, we
Application
can, yes.
So the taxpayers aren't paying for it. The short-term rental people,
Yeah.
would that be how it was? Yeah. So that's one of those fees that would come out of that bucket.
Right.
Okay.
So that just needs to be included as we look at the total fee structure.
Which I'm guessing probably already is.
Probably
But,
was.
That's all I have.
all right. Anything else on the item A?
I just wanted to chip in. I was busy looking through last emails when some of this stuff came up last year during budget, and Joe and I exchanged emails. At the time last year for this year's budget, $297 of the $300 was needed to cover the cost of the program. So that left $3 out of the $300 for workforce housing. At that time, also $150 of the $300 was to cover the cost of the processing and the software. And then we were also discussing the person that was running the program, their time was just estimated. So I'd hope going in the future, we do a better, and I guess, Mr. Town Manager, that's on you guys. instead of estimating what she was estimating 25 to 40 hours per week for running this program. So I would like at least a better accounting of it.
We can definitely do that. Definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that goes along with that actual cost of what all the staff time, including yours and anyone else, code enforcement. It'd be nice to know what those numbers actually are. Anything else, John?
That'll do it. Thank you.
Jim, anything else?
No.
Karen, you good?
I'm good.
Scott?
I'm good.
All right. Next is Old San Carlos parking fees. John, I believe this was your,
Right. I had a resident come to me and ask if there was a way we could help businesses during this slow season. And so I brought it up to council, and we turned it over to staff. And I think Frankie and Joe went through, and we've got some, I guess, bad news.
So we got this handy dandy bridge loan from the state to help us. Part of that was in receiving that loan was not to shoot ourselves in the foot and take away revenue that we're actively pursuing, such as which is with the parking fund. So it states right in there that all non-ad valorem revenue that we collect has to go towards the repayment of that loan. And it's very specific on what it dictates is classified as non-ad valorem revenue, and the fact that we pledged to that in acceptance of that document, and that those funds kind of handcuffs us to do anything of that sort.
I'm glad someone caught it. I'm glad you caught it. Was that you, Joe, that caught it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good
Of
job.
course.
Good job. Yeah, that could have been very bad.
That could have been.
So this is a non-issue.
Yeah, it has. Unfortunately, unless we can come up, I've tried racking my brain, and I honestly can't.
I think through the PIO, maybe we can push stuff out about, plenty of parking. Come and visit the businesses, something along those lines. All right.
Thank you.
Do we have any other suggestions to help the smaller businesses in downtown?
Well, I mean, there's the private parking lots that have reduced their rates now because of summer. I mean, they were up to $20 and $30 a day, and now they're back down to 10.
Yeah.
So at $5 an hour and 2 hour limit, that's only $10. Then you got to either put in more money or
Yeah. There
move
is
your cars.
there is
So
no more 2 hour limit.
There is no more 2 hour
No,
limit.
we did away with
Okay.
that
While ago.
That
last
was a
fall.
big
Yeah.
thing last year.
Okay, I know that's right. Okay, so but still, even if it's $5 an hour and you're there for 6 hours, you're at 30. You're better off to go to a smaller parking lot, private lot. And then there's a number in that area, and they all have reduced their fees for summer.
Is it possible to, it's been brought up, is it possible to expand? I know it's unfortunately just for residents that have the resident parking pass. Is it possible to expand where they can park? It's not affecting the fees, but I mean, it's a small gesture that could potentially help, people that are going to drive from the.
That can totally be done, because the areas that we usually use for residents is underneath the bridges
Bridge,
area.
yeah.
And with residents, again, still at a minimal impact to the island at this point, that can absolutely be done.
I mean, I think that would, maybe it's only just through the summer months, from this time to this time, you can do it.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I did too.
anything that can help.
Because in the summer, a lot of people aren't going to ride their bikes up there in the middle of July.
Right.
You know what I mean? Some will.
They can't ride their bike on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Well, unless they have an electric bike and go. No.
Becky, would they need a resolution for that, or can they just give us direction to?
I think the direction is fine.
I think so. We can just issue a something through Nicole that between July 1st, since we're getting close to July, or between now and September 30th,
Or why don't we say June 15th? Can we do it that quickly?
we can, as I'm saying, today through or whatever, as soon as we get out of here, we can send something from today through September 30th. Residents can park anywhere. With
Your pass.
At a town parking
in a
spot.
town
right?
spot. Correct. We gotta qualify that.
Yeah.
Or the extras coming out of your salary.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, just a thought, since this is somewhat related to potentially what we're discussing next week in terms of the millage rate. I had a thought that I wanted to share, because since we're not allowed to talk to each other except in these settings, I was thinking that, you know, if operative word, if the governor were to sign the budget, including the appropriations for Fort Myers Beach, which includes $8 million for us to purchase the new town hall building on the south end, I just want to give folks a thought in terms of Joe very eloquently discussed the importance of enhancing our emergency reserves. If that budget is signed and we're able to purchase that property on the south end, I think particularly given the fact that we decided not to move forward with the low income housing proposal for the old town hall property, I think that old town hall property becomes ripe for consideration for sale to enhance our emergency reserve fund. I asked Amy to send me the appraisals for that property. There were 2 appraisals done last year. I think one was for roughly 12 million and one was for roughly $15 million. So that would be an opportunity. Just again, we don't have to have a big debate today, but I just want people to begin to consider that might be an option for us to enhance our emergency reserve fund without impacting the millage rate. Just a thought, food for thought.
Yeah, and actually, I
donuts
had
out there
already
for thought, too.
discussed this in my one-on-one meeting with Andy and Frankie this week. And, you know, whether we would sell the whole property or part of the property.
Even part of it should probably
Yeah, like-
get us to where we need to be.
Yeah, sell the front end and leave the back end for what we need for usage for our staff and that type of thing. I mean, that makes a ton of sense to me.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, the only thing that is in my mind is what is available now next to it. You know, so every decision you make obviously has a consequence. So does that parcel then go to the same? Now we're dealing with what we're dealing with across the island with someone comes into your point, Scott, and is buying up all this area for development. And we're sitting here having discussions about something we don't want to have discussions about.
Because the
Just the opposite side.
Yeah,
of
and
it.
then,
Yeah.
well, the other side of that coin is when,
I think they're trying to do the front part or the back part of it.
Back part of it.
and then can you actually budget something like that, Joe, based on a potential sale? I mean, you can't.
The
right?
fire department, by the way, just for point of clarification, I understand the fire department's building on the front of that property.
Yes.
Correct, yes.
And but again, the value of that property for the old town hall is obviously the majority of the value is the property that abuts Estero Boulevard. So if we were to keep some of those back parcels for town purposes, I still think we could derive significant revenue from that sale.
But if you think about it, if the fire department is building on the front and we'd be selling the front and keeping the back, so it becomes a mismatch. So it doesn't become a huge plot all the way across.
It is odd that the fire department's not building in the back. That does seem odd to me, but because why do they need frontage? But that's not my decision.
Yeah, I just worried. I mean, remember we had before the storm, the issue was always, God, if we could just acquire some land to be able to do something, whether it's a connectivity of a bike path or have green space or something. And I just pause a little bit when it comes to selling something that we already have. You know, you're never going to be able to replace it once you sell it.
True.
So, I mean, if we can get through it without having to do that, Joe, that would be great, but no pressure. So we can add it. You want to maybe add it to another and begin.
Well, I don't think we have the luxury to add it to an
No.
MVP because we have to make a decision on the 17th. Hopefully the governor will help us with that decision by signing that
Let's hope.
legislation. Yeah.
Let's hope. He was just in town. Could have asked him, I guess.
Did you get invited?
Long story. Yes, I did, but
Because I never get an invite. So
by the time I got the message, it was too late. All right. Anything else on the parking fees? You guys have direction with the parking stickers?
Yes.
All right. Next is the Island Reentry Communication Plan. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Since I asked for this,
Oh, sorry.
and I wanted to sort of set the table a little bit
Please do.
to get some focus. The previous town manager let it be known that he had a plan for a hurricane, and he let it be known that they were going to execute that plan, and then he let it, and it was very poorly communicated. And so as we enter hurricane season, it's my understanding, talking with you all one-on-one, that we have a plan. And I have great confidence in the team to execute that plan. But I think where we could use a little work is to communicate that plan. And that's the purpose of today. So I just really wanted to give people a sense. One of the biggest challenges, as everybody knows, there were a lot of challenges. One of our biggest challenges is reentry after the storm. And if it's not clear to people, if people don't have confidence that they can get back on the island, they're more likely to stay on the island. So I just wanted you guys to give you a forum to kind of talk about what your plan is, help people better understand, give them some comfort, and just and then if we have questions, we'll follow up. But I wanted to sort of lay the foundation for today.
Of course, as you all found out, almost 2 years ago, you'd never know what you're going to get. It can be expected to be one thing and you get another. Everywhere I've been, I've tried to make sure that we not only had that plan in place, especially for reentry, because usually on barrier islands like this, or even where I was in Northeast Florida, there were several entry points and you had to communicate with several municipalities as far as when they were going to let somebody come across their bridge, when you were going to let somebody come across your bridge, and then it was FDOT controlled, and then you had your police department, and you had in our instance, you had the sheriff's office too that you were working with. So it's all about the relationships and the communication, and we just so happen to have a meeting that's scheduled this afternoon with the Lee County Sheriff's Office and the fire department, just to continually talk about this. We've got the hurricane passes that we issued last year. Tom has the example. And we also have the window sticker. The window sticker is key because I left it. I left my pass at the house. You're going to remove some of that if everybody comes to get the sticker. Those are now available, and we ask that people come and pick those up. Oh yeah, that's perfect. If we can get them on the screen, that they come pick those up and put them on the windows. And also the other pass is available too. So we're going to work with residents, the same way we do with any parking pass that we have, anything that's accessible for parking. Go ahead.
Andy, can I just stop you? Because that's such an important piece of the puzzle. And I'm sure Jacob's going to pull that up here. But we had a nice, during the interim town managers, and I think it continued under your leadership, we had a nice sort of recruitment effort to have everybody get the new parking a reentry pass. Does that mean people need to come back now and get the sticker? Do they need to fill out the form? Can you just kind of walk people? I love the sticker idea, but that's the first I've heard of it. And I don't know how to
Correct.
If they've already gotten their new reentry pass.
Well, the reentry pass, the sticker is what we use for the parking in general in town. We were just talking about parking, where are they going to park and things like that. If they already have the pass, that'll work. We got the stickers and we're going to use those in case people say, I forgot my pass. We want to make it fail safe. We want to make sure that we're not having this argument with Lee County Sheriff's Office or fire department or the state troopers at the point of entry. We're going to have staff located off island, and a location will be, and we're going to be advertising that very soon. We want to get all this information out. We hope to be like at Target, strictly because it's a bigger parking lot, a little further away, a little more out of the fray. And we'll have one of our vans or both of our vans from the Parks and Recreation tent set up where people can go. I know I've spoke with Bonita Springs when they allowed people back on the island. They came to their town hall. You could come to their town hall. You get your pass to get across to the island. Did you move it over side by side? So we would encourage people, if they can, to come and get it. We like to personally stick those on ourselves just because the other passes can be passed around and that type of thing. And it could be a non-resident gets it.
This just gave me, because when you put them on she's not here, but when you put them on our vehicles for our parking.
Correct.
The Public Safety Committee has been talking about a way to identify people. And whether people want to do it or not, I know the numbers that are on there, if they come and we put the sticker on, that could then let us know like whose car belongs to who. And should a car be left behind or something, you could identify the person by the sticker number. Is that part of the process? And some people might say, I don't want my name on there, but
we do take information. I mean, it's just like the hurricane entry pass. You had to have your driver's license, fill out a form. I mean, there was a lot of, information there. So we're getting the information. But yes, that even helps even further. We've heard a lot. Well, I didn't have my pass before. I've heard those stories. I wasn't here.
Here's the bigger, just to try to expound on this a little bit more, and this is just coming to my brain while you're doing, if there's a way to QR code this so that, because the biggest issue, these reentry passes were there when the storm hit.
Right.
We just didn't implement the process. We didn't implement using it. We tried it, that we did, and then we took it away, and then it became very confusing for the Lee County Sheriff's. We're so busy, we don't have time to check everybody's ID to see if they actually, that pass belongs to them. With that, if you could QR code it somehow, to be able to, you scan it quickly with your phone. It tells you this is, yes, they're a resident. No, they're not a resident.
Absolutely.
Instead of having to try to go through and look up a,
Get a driver's
I'm just
license
trying
that
to
goes
spitball
with
ideas
it, that type
because,
of thing.
the sheriffs, obviously they were just as busy as our town staff was, but we didn't have anyone dedicated to check people in to allow them. I think what I learned and what I heard from everybody after the storm was it has to be a very simple process for the first responders and for the Lee County Sheriff's Department. They have to be able to, as a car is coming up, easily identify that they're supposed to be here to wave them through. If they don't have something, they're going to send them away because they're not going to sit there and check IDs for everybody.
And that's to go further. We will have staff at each bridge as well, monitoring during the hike. There'll be at least 2 people there. Tom's staff will be out there. And then when it's a little less active, there'll be 1 person there along with Lee County Sheriff. We will man the bridge ourselves as well to identify those stickers as they come across. All we worry about is the sticker or the pass, not so much who's in the car. I mean, it's the blood relative thing, right? We don't care as long as you have that sticker, you're coming over. I mean, we could get all into that and keep going, but you could bring people that could ride with you. Maybe they didn't have their car was here. So, you could get into a lot of
Be careful.
things.
You're going to have pickup trucks.
I get it. I get it, but they've got to have a sticker and they have to be a resident in order to do that. They don't have the sticker or that pass. You can hand the pass off to anybody. I mean, that could be done, but that sticker is stuck. It's on that car. And we feel like that's a better system for getting back on the island.
And
it can be used for multiple things, parking and as well.
And another big concern was the time frame. There was no communicated time frame as to, we didn't know how we were going to get hit or if we were going to get hit.
Right.
So it's difficult. You got to let the first responders do their job, but at least to have some framework saying, depending on this, it's going to be a day, or depending on this, it's going to be 3 days. And I know that's got to start with the fire district and the Lee County Sheriff's Office.
Correct.
But I think to Jim's point, if people know that ahead of time and we just keep pushing it and beating it in their brains through the PIO over and over through hurricane season, that here's what the plan's going to be. If you leave, you'll be able to get on. Here's the time frames. Because then I think more people will leave because they won't feel necessary. And if there's a way that we can step up water enforcement, so many people were coming that shouldn't have been here, bad actors. I saw them firsthand. I know it's hard to believe, but I'm not a very fast runner. And,
But you're a long distance runner.
Becky, you're the last person I thought was going to laugh at. I like you even more.
Pretty fast on the first base.
Yeah,
You were
that's
running for water, apparently.
Yeah. So, I mean, so many people were coming by boat. And I mean, just in the hours or the minutes after the storm, just walking down the street, seeing people that obviously were in waiting. They were just waiting.
Mhm.
And they were coming by canal. They were jumping off on people's docks and properties.
Stealing, looting.
Yeah. I mean, that's what people are most worried about. So if we can somehow work with Lee County Sheriff's Department to make sure that we have that dedicated, or if there's something we can do with our staff to dedicate, patrolling this in the water when it's, this was a bad storm, but
Sure.
on a normal, tropical storm or something like that, to when people feel comfortable to leave and they know that they'll have a place to come back to, because the Lee County Sheriff's Office, in my opinion, did an excellent job of nipping that in the bud within 2
Right.
days. I mean, they were perp walking people up and down social
Absolutely.
media. So, but just the initial,
Yeah,
my
and,
2 cents.
and one thing we've done, we've already met with WGCU. Have I said that right? They never went off air, so obviously we'll have communication with people. They can log in, and if they're somewhere else, continuous information. We were going to pump out. We were talking about doing some videos in the next 2 to 3 weeks, just so we can get them out there, get them online, and then start pushing things about reentry. We were going to do it. We're going to do a test with our staff about where one morning we're going to send a text, because we all have everybody's phones, where they go meet, so we can do a dry run for where all our staff meets before they come to the island. Then we'll go together as a group, that type of thing. We want to do tabletop exercises between now and hopefully no storm getting here, but just in case it gets here, our staff is prepared. They know when, where, and how, and it will translate over to that confidence, we feel like, to the residents that we are doing our due diligence to make sure that we're going to be someplace they can find us if they need us. I don't have my pass, my car's still there, I don't have a sticker. Okay, staff should be able to look you up. We should have water bills, things like that, where we can find out who people are and be able to do that. We'll have that van, those vehicles set up probably at Target in that parking lot area. And it's a little further away from where the heavy traffic might be. And then they could be possibly escorted over with our vehicles, our town trucks, or something of that nature. We're still going to talk to the sheriff's office about that.
I think it's important too that you guys work with Arlene and her staff down in Bonita.
Yes.
Because not every storm is going to go north. It could go south.
That's correct.
And they may need help from us to have places to stage. So I know they've been they want to work with us, because if we would have worked with them before the storm, we could have had people coming. I mean, right after the storm, you couldn't use the South Bridge, but it doesn't mean you couldn't have staged there and then come around and had a smooth sailing and not have to bottleneck the north area. So I think it's important that we work with Bonita, because they had some really good ideas right after the storm of things that they could have helped us do to be prepared, and vice versa. You know, if the storm hits Bonita and we didn't get hit as bad, we've got places they can come and operate, and they can come and work.
I had a good conversation with Arlene. Arlene's the town manager of Bonita Springs last summer, and we've obviously built better relationships with here and with Dana and Sanibel, building all of our better relationship with the county and doing those type of things to make sure that we have a seat at the table, that when we put a call out, they respond, and vice versa. I mean, at the Florida City County Management Association meeting, I was talking to a couple of the managers on further away on other coasts that, you know, we're willing to come help you if you have that. And I'm asking if you could come help us if we have this. So we kind of are getting a mutual aid agreement just between towns. The police departments have them, but towns sometimes don't do that. You know, we need an extra 4 people to help with, you know, chainsaws and a pickup truck or a backhoe or something. Can you come help us? And we're all agreeing to.
And I also, sorry, Jim.
I'm sorry to get off subject.
No, this is all relative to this,
all
because I
relative,
think
yeah.
it's important too. Obviously, the staff wasn't far enough away in this storm. So I think it's important that the residents know where staff will be, because some people, if we're the closer to the airport, they may be flying in. They can get their passes or they can get their things right as they get off the airplane and not have to come and stop again. So I think it's important, at least I feel it's important, that they know where the staff is going to be, you know, in a safety situation, be able to operate the government should something like that happen again. Whereas before it was kind of top secret, you know, nobody really knew where we were.
Mayor and council, I'm not a big fan of putting all of your eggs in one basket. For instance, taking all of our town vehicles and putting them all in one location, because if something happens to that location or near that location, we're stuck. Mm-hmm. So we'll spread them out a little more amongst the county with staff when they go home. We're already working a plan with that. So, you know, you'll take a truck home, you'll take a truck home, and there'll be 3 of you live near each other so you can commute a little better. And so we'll be spread out a little more throughout the county prior to the event as well. So we just want to make sure all of our equipment is in safe places, because we need it. We still are trying to buy equipment that damaged and destroyed from Ian, but we want to make sure that our equipment and our employees, that's even putting all of our employees in one location. That's all of you in one location. I mean, that would be great, but if something happened and the whole government was wiped out, heaven forbid. But, you know, we want to make sure we're doing the right things. And plus, we don't violate sunshine laws, Becky, where they're trying to meet in hallways when you can't meet in hallways and things of that nature. I've had to deal with that. But, you know, just that kind of thing. We're trying to think a little more globally instead of just, you know, how's it going to affect just this specific spot, and how do we get back here? That is important. But we also need to be able to get the employees and the equipment back to help us do what we need to do. So we are planning as much as we can, and we continually meet about. Right now, we'll kick it up. We've been about every 3 weeks now. Now we're going to start meeting every week about our preparedness and getting that information. Just pushed it further out to your point.
Just a real quick insert question, because you had talked about respecting sunshine laws, and Becky, I'm hoping you're part of this exercise, because it seemed very. I know the mayor and I both were very frustrated that we didn't hold a town council meeting for, I don't know, month and a half, something like that.
6 weeks.
Sanibel was having them on a regular basis
Daily.
and we were given very unique legal counsel that we couldn't do it while Sanibel was meeting, you know, throughout the whole process. And
It was a mess.
I just want to make sure you're part of this process so we can figure out a continued
absolutely.
governance.
I already have a reentry pass. I mean,
To your point, I find that very disappointing and surprising at the same time.
wasn't
I mean,
for lack of effort.
the day of the building collapse, we got our council together to have the emergency order to do things like that. I mean, we will find a location. We'll advertise. It's an emergency.
Yeah.
We can advertise like that. So in 2 hours we're meeting. I mean, those things we can, and we will do that. I'm not going to be this lone ranger out here and, you know, trying to be the end all to end all. It's us. We're in this together. So I want to make sure that you're helping us make those big decisions. And as we do things under an emergency order, we need to bring them, but you as quick as we can to approve them, even though I might have already signed a contract or something, you need to be aware. Yeah, I don't think that's the way you run government. Not at all.
It just keeps going back to that communication word. It gets used a lot, but ideally I would love to see emails in September of people saying, would you please stop having Nicole put out the plan? We get it. I got it. I'll take those emails all day long.
Mhm.
I like that. And we will. I mean, that's of all of this, that's probably the easiest thing to do is to just pump people with information and appropriate information. We're also looking at a better system for communication. That'll be coming down the line. That's not for this discussion today, but it is a better discussion because we could get some kind of storm that really just affects the what I call the east end, but you call it the south end of the island. And it doesn't really affect down here. So we can just get to just those residents and focus on 6 streets, for instance, that, they're flooded out or something. But it's called the Everbridge system, and the county uses it and it's free to us. And it is a better system than the current one, but we'll get further into that as we go. We're not there yet.
Andy, I think we may have created a lot of questions here, and I don't want your our poor staff to get hit with these. And I love the idea of the parking sticker, but can you just go through again? Let's say I'm watching this today. I have the new reentry pass. I don't need a sticker, but let's say I want to get one. Do you come down to town hall? Is that a free sticker? What's the process?
I'll let Tom explain.
And is there a cost? Do you have to show your driver's license just so people know? And do they need the sticker if they already have the reentry pass? Is it a luxury just to have in your car all the time? Can you just talk a little bit about it so you don't get 100 phone calls on this?
So Thomas Yazzo, Operations Compliance Security Manager for Fort Myers Beach. So the idea of the parking sticker was kind of something as a plus for residents. The hurricane reentry was more of not a mandatory, but kind of recommended. The idea of using this as a secondary, that's why we changed the design on it as well. The idea was that it kind of gives it a backup. So when you come in to get your parking pass or your hurricane pass, you're vetted. And you're vetted by the fact that we ask for proof of ownership on the island. You have to show a license that you're the person that's getting it. We take down all your information, your registration information on your vehicle. We take all that down. That gets put into a program, and we have that all documented. So that's what we're going to do, printing up hard copy, plus have it on laptops. Because the issue is when you have an emergency, we all know, cell towers go down, we have no service. So the idea of the QR code is great, but it's also deficient in the fact that if we lose service and power, then we can't document that and be able to scan without having Starlink or something else. Mm-hmm. So those are issues. So I like the idea of the hard copy that allows us to do that. So yeah, they can just come to town hall. They can spend $25 to get the parking pass.
So that
re-entry is free.
That was my question, because I think that some people just may not know how the system works. So this is literally a parking pass that gets you parking benefits.
Correct.
But it also serves as an additional benefit to re-entry after a hurricane.
Yes, sir.
And it's $25.
Yes, sir. And it also is documented to the vehicle. Each one of these passes is to the vehicle because we take the plate.
And so just talk a little bit about, I think most people know this who are island residents, but some of them don't. They don't know that this, I think it's a pretty good deal for residents. Talk a little bit about the parking pass piece of that sticker.
Do you want to just distinguish that? Because that, to me, that kind of got blurred together a little bit.
I agree.
The parking pass and the parking sticker. They could do the same thing, but one costs $25 and the other one does not.
So it's either the parking sticker is the parking pass.
Yeah.
The hurricane reentry is a different monster. That's something
that's got nothing to do with parking.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with parking. That is just getting back.
I misheard you then. Yeah. I thought you said the sticker could act as the reentry pass.
It's a backup.
Okay.
It's a backup. It's really what the idea is.
It could be dual purpose. The other is a single purpose.
Yes.
But one costs money, one does not.
Yes, because the parking allows you to park downtown for free. And now as your guidance, we are going to now
take 30 more seconds. And if somebody buys the parking pass for $25, tell them where they can park with that parking pass.
Well, right now you can park anywhere for the rest of the summer. So because you've opened up in that guidance, so they can park anywhere as long as it's in a legal town parking spot.
Does that include beach access as
including
well?
Beach access is correct. Now, are we going to open up Wasting Away to that as well? Because that was never part of it. So everything, as long as it's a legal parking spot within the boundaries of the town and it belongs to the town of Fort Myers Beach, then they'll be able to park there.
Well, you raised a very good question though about Wasting Away. And that's the only beach parking that's down in the downtown area. I don't want to complicate things. Never mind. Overthinking it.
So I have a question. So is it $25 per vehicle?
Yes, $25 per vehicle per year.
Okay. Okay. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
Which is a good deal now if you can park anywhere.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can park anywhere.
Of course,
and-
those fees are set by you, that not set by staff.
yes.
And we can't waive them if we wanted to.
And the idea to make it yearly, I think, is a good idea because then it allows us to revet our residents to make sure they still live here, they still have property on the island, they still live here in any manner, because we have people who either leave because they were renting or they've sold their property and have left the island, whatever. It makes it consistent and everybody's gotten used to it now. We don't just go from last year's list. You have to come in and show us documentation that you still live here.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
John, you got anything on this?
I do not.
You good, mister?
Nothing additional. Thank you for
Although
the
I'm thinking
conversation.
about having Kimosabi as my next on-air name.
Oh, boy. Karen?
No, I'm good.
Scott?
I'm great.
Okay.
So you won't be the Lone Ranger.
Next, downtown zoning district FAR. Whose was this item? Was it-
This is mine.
Okay.
So, as you can see by this
Heavy packet?
package here, the impetus of this was, so the beach bar is trying to build back. And in town review, it was discovered that they can't go by their lot size to determine FAR. They have to go by the buildable area. Am I saying that correctly? Because of the coastal construction line?
The floor area ratio is based on the zoning district. So the downtown zoning district has floor area ratio. The EC zoning district does not. The same way density is applied.
So basically what happened is they can't, their FAR was, because their lot is smaller because of the EC, buildable area was reduced. So that entire street of I Street is affected because their buildable FAR is only one. Is that correct? So every one of these people would have to come in to get, I guess the beach bar has to come in and get a CPD, correct?
And so something that we may want to consider in this conversation is residential versus commercial. With the beach bar, it's mixed it's mixed use.
Mhm.
So I know one of the discussion points has been residential is usually building coverage. I'm so sorry. Building coverage, and then commercial is usually floor area ratio. And with the beach bars instance, it's a mixed use. So I mean, I think FAR definitely makes sense, but it is in the downtown district. I mean, I think that's something to consider, though.
I guess one of the questions is, do we want to do a FAR calculation for residents in the downtown district?
Well,
Because we are now.
yeah, well, residents outside the downtown district use coverage, right? 40% coverage of the lot size. Why can't we just use that? I mean, I can understand the mixed use part of it, but that's the only mixed use part on that, in this case, on that street. I just want to make sure whatever we're changing doesn't have an adverse, because someone had mentioned something about the CCCL and counting, that could be massive in some spots on the island. But I mean, it makes sense to me if it's floor area ratios is to apply that to residential just doesn't make sense.
I would concur.
Yeah, how do we, I guess I'm looking for your recommendation here. How do you, with a mixed use property like this one, and I'm sure there's probably other ones that fall within this, how do you, or there potentially could be some built that fall within this. How can we make it that, could you say just because if it has residential as part of it, that it would fall as a mixed use if it has residential as part of the plan, that you use the 40% coverage versus that would eliminate that from being from commercial then?
So we would probably need to make a change to the comprehensive plan because we continued what was in the previous comprehensive plan, which is reflected in the land development code. So the land development code has 40% coverage for RC and RS, residential single family and residential starts with a C. Anyway, so for those two zoning districts, it's 40% coverage, but then all the other zoning districts have the floor area ratio and it's maxed out at 1.5. So we would need to go back through the comprehensive plan and potentially make a change there to amend it and say floor area ratio on commercial structures. How would we want to handle if somebody comes in initially with a commercial structure or a residential structure and then wants to turn it commercial, or vice versa?
Well, I was just thinking about that as you were talking. Is it possible to put wordage in there that if the residential part of the mixed use is equal to or greater to than the commercial space, then you would use the 40%? However, if the commercial space is greater than the residential space, then you would use the commercial calculation. I'm looking at these guys out here too, because the more minds, the better. I'm just trying to think of ways that you could help differentiate between, is it more of a commercial building than a residential, or is it more of a residential or equal to as a commercial?
Well, and if we know how people live in spaces and use spaces, it may start out with, I have this little shop and it's in this little corner of my house and I'm getting really successful and I make it bigger. Would that change how we evaluate it?
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor. I would ask for unanimous consent to proceed out of order. We've got a couple subject matter experts out there. Just if you.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that, but I kind of want to hear from Sarah first, and then
I thought you were done.
So I have a question, sir. So we have to change the comp plan. We can't throttle it in the LDC.
The way the comprehensive plan is written right now, it refers to intensity for those districts. So for pedestrian commercial and for Santini and for like all of the districts, maybe commercial resort. I'm trying to remember what the names of those districts are, but they all have intensity as opposed to building coverage. So that's based on FAR, and it has the FAR called out in each one of them, because that was one of the things we wanted to make sure that it was actually called out and it was clear in the comp plan, because it wasn't before. So, I don't think that should prevent us from making this decision. It isn't finalized yet. It's still at the state. So when we get it back, we do have the opportunity to make some changes if we need to.
Well, I've got issues with FAR on the other side, on the commercial side of it. But
yeah,
I think making it more clear, to me, it makes sense if you can differentiate between, is it more residential than commercial, even though it's in a zoning district. In this case, unfortunately, it's in a district that restricts the size of it. It could be very clear.
Yeah. Or do we want to do something like, so you're going to have instances where there's a home business, it's no outside employees, people aren't coming to the house. So that's truly residential still. And then you're going to have instances where it's commercial on the first floor and then living units above. And that's usually looked at as mixed use. And usually floor area ratio would apply, because it gets really dicey if you try to separate those out, because then you're only applying FAR to one portion of it, and then they could have a really massive house, or they could end up with a lot more square footage potentially if you're counting them separately. So making sure that maybe we just find a way to accommodate what actually makes sense on those lots. And if we think that building coverage works and we just apply the max FAR, but the max FAR in a lot of districts is 1.5. So that's still not particularly high.
Well, I'm just trying to think of some of the properties like this one and some of the other ones that are out there that would be coming for. It sounds like we're trying to promote commercial on the first level, and if you have residential above it, then that's even better. So I'm just trying to figure out if there's not an easy way, but a way to, if it's this, then you can use this calculation. If it's this, then you use this calculation. You know what I mean? And that, I don't know if that's being too simplistic, but because if you're looking at a 1 acre lot, for instance, and their height is restricted to what it is, and to me, it just seems to make sense. Maybe, you guys are the experts. You would be able to weed through some of the things that I'm probably not thinking about, but it would be, I think, as a person developing or someone coming in to buy a lot in a zoning district, they would know. Obviously we'd have to make the change like you said, but at least they would obviously know ahead of time. Maybe this will change their design. Maybe they want to have more residential because they want to get a little bit bigger space. And then keep so everybody kind of benefits, the community benefits as well as the person that buys the property. And then if they want to have more commercial, that's fine. But now this is the calculation. The FAR is a calculation that you have to go by, which again, commercial, I have a problem with the whole FAR calculation, and I'll explain that when we're done figuring this out. But
I would be interested to hear what they have to say because I think we need to weigh it, and that's the difficult part.
Is everybody okay here from Patrick and Albert?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I don't know.
Thank you. For the record, Patrick Vanass. So from a residential standpoint, best practices, common planning practices is FAR does not apply to single family residential. FAR is a measure of commercial intensity usually or non-residential intensity. So in this case, we've got the RM district, which is a residential district that allows single family and multifamily. And also you've got some areas where you've got some remnant commercial that also exists in there. I think when I look at the code that since there was some existing commercial, the idea was an FAR was applied, but there was no distinction made to the fact that the FAR should not apply to the single family home. So I think the easy solution is when you go to the table, the zoning table with the various development standards, there could be a footnote at the bottom of that table just saying floor area ratio does not apply to single family homes. I think, Sarah, you were saying that the comp plan does make a reference to commercial, to intensity and density.
I mean, it does, but it doesn't talk about certain districts call out intensity inhabited to 1.5.
Okay. But my thought was in looking at the comp plan, I don't think we need to change that in that even if there's reference to intensity, that applies to commercial.
Okay.
It doesn't apply to residential. And then our code clearly says that intensity is a commercial measure, applies to commercial and mixed use, does not apply to single family. And then when it comes to mixed use projects, again, common planning practices, if you've got more than one use, residential and commercial, you're mixed use, FAR applies. And I would keep it as simple as possible. It's a mixed use project, FAR applies. It's single family, FAR does not apply.
And isn't that, Scott, what you were saying that they found with, in this case, the beach bar was having an
Well, I
issue
think
with
what happened with the
Let Albert.
Yeah.
Albert, you want to explain the beach bar situation? He'll much.
Albert Danvers for the record. This whole thing came out because of the beach bar, but the stuff I'm talking about is not advocating for beach bar. It's just when you start working in the area, you start realizing how were things done in the past, what's being done on the left, what's being done on the right, what could come on I Street, and it's also on Avenue E as well too, where Wicked Wings used to be next to Lani Kai. We're talking to several people, and one of the things we realized through beach bar was the FAR 1.0. Okay, we get that. We're going through a CPD process right now for that. But when I'm having to have conversations with other design professionals, we're hearing now, not just downtown building a single family, residential multifamily. We have a client down in the 5,000 block of Estero that Patrick and I are working on as well too. The FAR is really killing it for a single family home because you're getting restricted a lot more than if you did a lot coverage. We're also hearing other design professionals on the north end.
Hold on, before you go any further than that, didn't we talk about this? Didn't we say whatever was under roof is what you could build back? But did that apply just to how many units they could have and not necessarily the square footage of the building? Because I know we had discussion about if you had a triplex in an RM district, you could have a triplex back and you could have the square footage that fit as long as you were under the 40% coverage.
So that's the post-disaster build back. So we're talking about single family residences that they can build as much as they want and they're allowed to have their single density unit because that's what they had before, but it's that top cap that's put on it by the floor area ratio. So there may be instances where people have 3 units and maybe it was approved in 1980 and it's going to be over the 1.2 and then we're going to run into that. So I think this is something that we need to look at because I don't know how equally this was applied across the board. I went back through multiple years looking at different properties to see how it had been applied, and it seems to be pretty scattered on whether it was applied consistently or not. It should have always been 1.0 in the downtown, and a lot of those were older homes, but, finding that some of them appear to have gotten additions and may not be in compliance. So we're not sure how many of these we're going to run into where somebody's trying to do the post-disaster and have the ability to give back that square footage, and then they're going to be over the FAR. And then instances where it's a single-family residence and they're just not really able to build more than a floor and a half.
Yeah, my primary thing about this is about single family only, which is not about the build back policy. So if any of those lots on I Street, someone trying to build a single family home, in their mind, they're thinking side setback, height, CCL line, that's your maximum footprint. If you want to take advantage of, that's why you have a close setback. That's why you have the build to line. That's why you have the height. Well, if you do a FAR 1.0 or 1.2 residential family, you're never going to even get to those setbacks or that height. So I provide those examples to show you what calculations are for a single family home. And that's what I want to focus on. So going back to what I was saying earlier, where other design professionals telling us on the north end to build back a single family home in a downtown zoning, they have to use a FAR of 1.2, or if it's residential, 1 versus 1.2, right? Their house is smaller now. And if for no way to get around that right now is to do a CPD in a home or RPD. So it seems a little ridiculous to kind of go through all that work. And then to go back what Patrick is saying, you have that table that shows all of the usage, right? And it says 40% for coverage, but you have these footnotes down here. And here's a good example where it says residential, multifamily, single family homes. If your lots are this size, you're this setback. If your lots this size, this set. Just add another footnote. Residential single family homes do not apply FAR. Use lot coverage.
Seems simple.
It's a big difference, honestly, on some, and it's not across the board because I did a house off of Pearl towards the Gulf. They have a lot piece of property, but they're not subject to that CCL restriction, which cuts their property in half, if not sometimes 3/4 of it, and you can't take advantage of that calculation. So the lot coverage is really applied for single family. I think that's what we're trying to really advocate here in that document. So the Beach Bar just uncovered that. We're realizing that because I've talked to our client and there was a lot for sale, I think at the 60 Alva that just went off the market a couple of days ago, and they were showcasing the rendering. You can't build that house. The clients I have at 5,000 were sold a piece of property that there's other problems beside the FAR that were, again, not advised appropriately. And because of that, they overpaid for a piece of property. What I don't want to see that happen is someone else buy a piece of property like 60 Alba thinking they can build a 3-story home next to the other one. And we have to use FAR. There's no way. It's going to be half the size of that home. So now we have this discrepancy. How did they get built when they were built when all these codes are still in effect? And I know we can't go backwards, but moving forward, can we simplify it? And that's why I want to say it's only single family, because I know it gets complicated with duplex, triplex, multiplex. That's a whole other realm. We're going to build back policy, or we're just reducing it back to 1 unit. So
it seems like a fairly simple solution. To me, it makes sense if you're referring to just single family residential homes.
Yeah, because there's a lot of lots on the Gulf. And if you're not in the Gulf, it's not so much of a problem. It's the Gulf ones that are causing the one, because your property goes way past the CCL, but you can't count that for lot coverage. And we may need to look into that, how it's written, because I noticed that you're not even supposed to count that past the CCL line on lot coverage, but it's been done that way for a while. I'm looking at black and white and realizing, how are these getting permits? Because it's a staff opinion, I agree, but I think that needs to be cleaned up too. For moving forward, it's going to come. A lot of Gulf on property going to be developed soon, new homes. So I Street, if it becomes like someone buys 6 properties and they're going to do mixed use, commercial, it's mixed use. It's far. We get that, but I think it's a lot easier. Like looking at the small lots, they're probably going to be seasonal, weekly rentals. 3-story homes that have 6-bedroom homes, right? That's appropriate for that area. And I think that's going to hinder them from wanting to do this move forward.
Well, and with the Beach Bar one, so in this scenario, the Beach Bar could either go the CPD route or the development agreement route?
Correct. Yeah, we're in that process right now. So we already made a determination. In fact, I think it's going to be hitting you guys pretty soon for that one. But that's what caused this to come up and say, what happens to
Sure.
the property to the left? Because that person had a house that was knocked down a year or two before the storm.
Yeah.
Their whole other homes were lost. And those people may be putting back a home and they're going to then realize, whoa, a FAR. And I know every design professional thinks that like what we do, and I'm not saying we're awesome at this all the time. We're just learning as we're going on some of these things on the beach, but they make it a situation where they think FAR doesn't apply for a house, design a home, pay for the fees, go through permitting, and the first three comments can come from zoning and say 1.0, and they're going to say, whoa, I can't build a 4,000 square foot house. I only can build 1,800 square foot. Who would spend $3 million, $4 million on a lot and only be able to build a $1 million home? That doesn't make financial sense.
And Sarah, do you think by adding just a footnote to the land development code, like was suggested, is something that could be done to alleviate the issue that this is causing?
I think that's pretty straightforward. I mean, we have a lot of footnotes in that table already. It wouldn't be terribly complex, but I do agree that if it's a mixed use, it does need to do the FAR.
Okay.
And if they want to do more than that, CPD's the development agreement. Yeah.
Everybody else okay with that?
Yeah, I think this coincides too with the communication that we got from other engineering firms and things, and just propose that the LDC table RM the downtown district have a footnote added to allow property owner constructing a single family home to be under a 40% lot coverage. It's the same thing as what everyone's saying.
If you may also, if you could direct staff to look into that lot coverage definition and the specific case that Albert and I are working on, the portion that's developable, that's, landward of the CCCL is limited. So when you apply the FAR, they can't build a very big home. If we applied lot coverage on the entire lot, they would have ample square footage for a nice size home. But again, I think we need to go back and look at that lot coverage definition also, because if they can't use a lot of that lot to calculate their coverage, I don't know if that'll work. So just something to look at.
Well, the thing that worries me about that, Becky, is can you do that for residential only and not for commercial? Can you segregate the two? Because if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is in a residential family to allow them, which they currently can't do now, to calculate the property seaward of the CCCL towards their 40% coverage, which would allow them to potentially build a bigger home, but still has to fall within the side setbacks, height, everything else that matters. Does that have an adverse effect on commercial then? Or is commercial going to come in and say, wait a minute, you did it for residential. How come you're not going to let me? There's one property I can think of right off the top of my head that would be here tomorrow saying, wait a minute, you let the residential people do it. Why can't we use our property to calculate our FAR?
And I don't know the repercussions. I haven't looked at it, so I'm just bringing it up as something.
I don't think there's a problem. You can treat residential differently than commercial.
Okay. So wouldn't there's no law that would say that because you're doing it for this, you have to do it for.
No.
Okay.
Also, I think, Sarah, the other alternative is if we don't change that definition in any way, I think you could then ask for a variance on the lot coverage versus I think an FAR, you can't ask for a variance on the FAR. I think just something to consider.
So basically what you're saying is if this change in this footnote is put in, then you could come into the LPA and ask for a variance. And if it's unanimously approved and nobody objects within 10 days, it doesn't come before us and it's a much smoother process than having to do an RPD or development agreement.
And the reason for the beach bar having to go do a CPD is because you can't ask for a variance for FAR. So they have to go through that CPD or development agreement. So I think if it was a lot coverage issue, even if the definition doesn't change and even if it does hinder this property, we're already planning on coming in for a setback variance. So we could include that lot coverage variance also in there.
Makes sense.
Yeah, just I don't want to be a dead horse, but like I know I gave these exhibits, but on page 3 of that exhibit are 2 copy pastings from the LDC. The top one is for FAR. The bottom one is for lot coverage. You'll notice that on both of them, 2 parentheses is written exactly the same. It's verbatim. Lot coverage on the bottom, again, reading it black and white, design professional says, I cannot count anything past the CCL line for lot coverage. To the right of that, in blue, are just two examples of recent permits of brand new homes that in which they counted the whole entire lot as lot coverage, which I think that's what should be done. That's correct. That's consistent with all the other homes that are being built on the Gulf have done that were allowed to use lot coverage. So if you take it back to the CCL line, in which what you were just saying, that's also hindranceable too. So I really think that wording in that second paragraph there for intensity and building coverage, item 2, needs to be cleaned up for the wording for residential, how you actually do that. And I go back to when we talked about the build back policy, exhibits, visuals. When you have that in the LDC, that solidifies, oh, that's how you calculate it. That's how you don't calculate it, because we're all going to be gone 15 years from now and these codes are still in effect. That's all I'm trying to say. If we can simplify and clear, then we don't have inconsistencies where that guy was able to get a permit, even though the staff interpreted wrong, and now we're changing it. I just trying to have consistency so fair for, again, single family homes.
You get all that, Sarah? So the other issue I have with FAR, since it's on here, and when we had the talk on the comp plan about changing the multiplier to the FAR, when I went back and watched it, a lot of things popped in my brain that this could be, I mean, what this could potentially allow for development on this island, it would be far more intense or dense, I should say, than by keeping that multiplier in there. And as an example, there was a recent development that came through that could have built a 500,000 square foot building. When you use FAR as a calculation, the amount of rooms that they could have had by right would be exponentially way more than they could by the calculation that we have now. And I don't think, at least that wasn't my intent, to make that change. Now, there's other properties on the island that would fall within that. But what gives me pause about it is, does that now allow, to what Scott was saying earlier, someone to come in and buy up a bunch of land and use this new calculation to build 1,000 square foot hotel on the beach that nobody wants, and they could do it by right because we changed the way we calculated something? And I've had this conversation with other staff and Jason, and they see it. So my question was, if you do that, or if we decide that we want to continue down that path, is there a way to put a backstop in there? And I don't know if it's ever been done. I mean,
can you put a backstop in the LDC, or just, cap it at a certain number of units?
Does everybody understand what I'm saying?
Just to be clear, though, I think you misspoke when you said 1,000 square foot. You meant 1,000 room hotel.
1,000, yes.
Sorry, okay.
Because then it's regulated by the requirements of the law to have a certain size room.
Yep.
So if it's 450 square foot room, simple math tells you in a 500,000 square foot building, that's a lot of rooms. And that's a lot of traffic. That's a lot of things that we're trying to avoid. So I don't want to make sure that we're not going down a road that we're going to really regret later. And I don't know if you guys are, I know you guys are following along with what I'm trying to say, or maybe you're not, but.
So I think that your backstop really is your floor area ratio that is fairly limiting. And so even if you would allow a higher multiplier, or even if the multiplier doesn't apply, it's still building size that applies. So you still have your setbacks, you still have your height, you still have your number of stories and your FAR. The FAR is always going to be that max unless they want to propose a change to the comprehensive plan. So I think you've always got that sort of backstop, but you have to decide if that's the appropriate floor area ratio. Is it enough to allow development, but not so much that it allows huge development? And I think one of the advantages that you do have is that you're not including the area beyond the CCCL. So you're not really, because some of those parcels go way out onto the beach. So if you see how much land is included in some of these parcels it's considered environmentally critical, if they were able to count those towards their FAR, they could have substantially more square footage to use. So I think that's sort of the backstop.
Well, I think maybe I'm not articulating it enough, but I understand the FAR would be the backstop versus the multiplier.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just use Red Coconut property as an example of what they could build there by right, the massing of that building and the FAR that's put there. and how many rooms they could have by right. And if you add the multiplier, that number is still what, 225, we'll say, because I think it's 150, right? 15 units per acre. So that'd be 225 units. You could get substantially more units using FAR in that building that they could build by right than 225. And it would be substantial when you look at the size of the building, at least in my head in quick math. And is that something, and that those are the big properties that I'm thinking about. You know, I couldn't imagine having and I don't know what the number is off the top of my head. I should have probably did the math, but is that 1,000 rooms? Is that 800 rooms? Is that 700 rooms? And does that area make sense to have 700 rooms of hotel? And they could do it by right with this change to the comp plan?
And that's a really good point. If they can do it by right, then you don't have any opportunity. You know, if they're applying for a CPD, there's your like, oh, that's too many rooms. No, cut back your rooms.
That's exactly my point. Is that
if they can do it by right,
we're taking one of our aces out of our poker hand and putting it back in the deck. Or all of them for the most part, because now you have no negotiating power. They can just come in and say, I'm building this and I'm building it right here. And thank you for letting me buy the land.
Yeah.
And that's what I think, at least personally, I want to avoid, because I don't think that is what the island wants or can support. So that's why I was saying a different backstop. So if you're using that, is there a cap? Is there a way to do it that there's a cap on rooms that, you know, it can't exceed this many rooms based on the zoning district? And I don't want to make it too cumbersome, as people seem to have gotten used to the multiplier now, and they can ask for more than what the multiplier is. And then we can hash it out if we think it makes sense or not.
Yeah. And maybe the option is to change the multiplier a little bit to make it more workable for the size projects that make sense for the town, but not take it away completely. I mean, because the 1 and the 1.5 and the 2 are not very workable, because you'd have to have an acre to get, if it was at the 2, 12 units. An acre's expensive and 12 units is not much if in a hotel. So, figuring out maybe the correct level.
Yeah, I'm open to looking at that and maybe adjusting the levels and still giving yourself an opportunity. But just to simply go to FAR, to me, would be extremely dangerous with some of the big projects that are potentially coming down the pipeline and the size of the properties. And then if someone buys the next lot and the next lot and the next lot, I mean, you could really have a big building on the beach.
Yeah, that is true. I'm curious what the rest of, I mean, how is ever, I mean, I don't have a problem with that change. I think that I understand what you're saying, and that does make sense as a concern. I'm not sure what that needs to look like.
Yeah, and I don't know that I think the biggest issue I've heard is that the multiplier, even when you're going from residential to commercial, it's difficult, to your point, when you're buying an acre land and you're trying to maybe do a hotel or something that you can't, the numbers just don't add up. And I get that, but I think going too far to the other end, you could be creating something that's completely opposite of saying it's, you know, financially not viable. There's got to be a sweet spot in there, and maybe adjusting those multiplier numbers a little bit makes sense, as opposed to just opening the floodgates and saying future councils down the road, you are not going to have the ability to negotiate anymore, because the building is a building and what they can fit in the box is what they can fit in the box.
Sorry, I can't decide if I should sit or stand. So I think that you do have a good point, because while you don't want to be overly burdensome in requiring everybody to do a CPD, you do want to have some control over these larger developments that will impact the community. And I would agree that you are getting rid of sort of one of your holds on the process by getting rid of the multiplier, because people do have to come in and request an amendment to that in order to get additional rooms.
Yeah, and my biggest concern was the density part of it, the adding to the traffic. I mean, it's more cars that are coming to the islands, more people. Can we support that?
Yeah.
And to just give away that negotiation or the right to say, no, that's just too much. To me, it's really risky.
I can understand.
Yes, I think you please listen. I hear from my fellow counselors on if everybody's followed along with my gibberish.
I share and respect those concerns. I don't know what the answer is, but I share those concerns.
Okay. Are you gonna say something? So does this just mostly affect, from what I'm hearing from you that it mostly affects people buying multiple
Well, it would
lots
be any,
and combining,
it
or
would be any
is
commercial.
any
So
commercial?
Any commercial. So if you had a 1 acre lot, it would apply to you. Now, if
Mhm,
you bought the 2 1 acre lots next to it, now what you can build is obviously much bigger.
mhm,
And the way it's calculated now is you collect those lots, you're still restricted by height and setbacks on the size of what you can build. But you changing it to FAR calculation, you now lose how much they can put inside. The only thing regulating what goes inside that box is the state statute, whatever the size of the hotel room has to be. If it's 400 square feet, however many square feet of space you got divided by 400 or 450, whatever it is, that's how many rooms you get by right. Well, right now you would have to say, I've got a 100,000 square foot building. I had a density of 15 units
mhm.
and now I want to have 100 units. What's that multiplier? Or you, in this case, if we have 10 units and now you want to go, you could add a 2.5 multiplier. Now you can get you can get those extra rooms. That would be eliminated in this scenario and what I'm talking about by using FAR. It's whatever the box is. And if it meets the height and the setbacks, if it meets all the other land development code requirements, whatever you can fit inside that box, you can do by right. And there's nothing the council could do
So,
to
Mr.
say
Ma-
that's too much.
Dan, I agree with you, but I also agree with Sarah that the multiplier needs to be raised.
I'm not opposed to looking at that. I'm just opposed to just opening the floodgate to the ability to then go and purchase. I mean, someone could purchase an entire city block and you couldn't tell them 1,000 rooms is too much.
But just to be clear, they could, through the CPD process, go through and
Yes.
ask for permission. Yeah.
If we don't change the FAR, if we don't change the calculations to FAR, yes, they can go through the CPD process and ask,
Okay.
or the development agreement and ask for more, but you can't take away
You
what
don't get it by right. Yep.
Yeah, you can't take it away from them once you change the rules
I got you.
for them to be able to get it by right.
I got you. And I do agree that it'd be nice to find some middle ground for the smaller folks.
Sure.
So they don't feel burdened.
And
by
maybe
it.
there's a way to, without trying to make it too complicated, instead of having just a number across the board, can you have, a lot's this size, this multiplier applies. A lot this size, this multiplier. So the bigger the lot, maybe the smaller the multiplier. I don't know. Just trying to throw ideas. This is not my realm. This is your realm. But
No, I just wanted to throw out some numbers. So if we had a 1 acre lot, and there was a FAR of 1.2, which is kind of a common one, that would be 52,000 square feet of floor area. But that does include the ground floor.
Right.
So that's usable space technically in a
so
building.
if you divided that by 4,
But that 1 acre is 6 units max.
Right.
So 6 times whatever the multiplier is. So
12.
you have what you're saying is correct. You get a lot more square footage that would allow a lot more developed hotel rooms.
But now,
potentially.
since you got your calculator out, do the math the other way. If it was FAR versus the dwelling units per acre and the multiplier, how many rooms could they have there? That's the comparison that people need to see. Is if it's an acre and do it this way, it's this much. If it's FAR, it's this much, and then now go to a 2 or 3 or 5.
Mathematically, it's not straight 450 or 450. You've got mechanical, you've got hallways, you've got elevator.
Right. I mean, I'd want to.
I mean, the max multiplier is 2.5, and unless it's a platted overlay that already had 10 dwelling units there, or it was 10 individual lots or 12 individual lots, then you get the multiplier on the individual lots. But if it's the basic density of 6 times the 2.5, which is the highest multiplier, you only get 15 units. So the difference is 15 units versus 52,000 square feet. I don't know how large the rooms are in the hallways and how all of it evens out. And maybe, that's a good question for people who are involved in that type of business and the design professionals, like how could that space be used and how many more units could you get out of it?
And
I couldn't speak to that.
And maybe that's why there needs to be a sliding scale if possible between the smaller boutique lots, if you will, and the 10 acre lots or the 5 or 6, 7 acre lots that people have, because it's not relative, in my opinion. I get that what you can have here and what you can have here are two different things and the numbers don't add up. And I completely, I sympathize with that. I do. But to just change it completely across the board, I think would have severe adverse effects that we would regret and people living on this island would regret later.
So thinking about next steps, So with the FAR and the lot coverage, we do want to add the note about single family residential. For how we want to handle the multiplier, do we want to handle that as part of the LDC and do some public engagement and get more people involved in that process and try to get it a little bit more narrowed down? Or do you want me to try to take a stab at this with the assistance of some people who are involved in this type of industry?
Well, first we would have to, because I think if watching the meeting, I think we gave you direction to, let's send the comp plan amendment to, we would have to undo that.
Well, we
before
have
would
the
get to
opportunity to make changes when
Right.
it comes back.
But
So
then to have, to your point, I think having a community discussion makes sense.
Okay.
To say what, but then you can have scenarios.
Mhm.
In a 1 acre lot, if you change the multiplier, this is what it was, this is what it could be.
Mhm.
And then I think between discussions with the public, you'll come down to a number that makes sense versus just opening it up and saying, I'm folding my hand and not having a seat at the poker table, for
Yeah.
lack of better analogy. To me, that makes more sense than, because then people have an input. And right
Mhm.
now they would, this change would not give anybody an input on big commercial properties.
yes, that's true.
And adversely, would it hurt the smaller lots that have, a little boutique hotel that had 4 units, or by changing it to FAR, they can only have so many. Maybe they couldn't even get 4 units in because the FAR would be so small.
That's true.
So it could hurt them as well.
Yeah.
As benefit the big people.
Mhm.
That was a big sigh.
Lots of. No, I'm not. It's not a
Yeah.
frustrated side.
No,
It's
I think
lots to chew
I
on.
think the hiccup is in that multiplier. What's that range, and how can we apply that and still keep, future councils having the ability to discuss and work with what works in the community, and it doesn't hinder the small people either. So I'd be all for looking at how do we adjust these multipliers that make sense, because I agree with you. 6 units per acre, it's difficult to make the numbers work. Not that I've said many times, not that is a reason to make a decision, but it's a reality.
Sir, what other? I always hate to do this, but what do other towns? How do they work their? Is it FAR? Is it?
Well, it might be something we could have Becky help us with. I mean, she works in 2 other coastal communities. Maybe she can work with staff to see how every community is a little bit different, but
A lot of communities apply the FAR. I think one of the biggest differences is that in this town, we for the most part, can't build anything on that first floor, but we're still counting that space.
Mhm.
So that kind of puts a kink in some plans, but also a lot of communities just decide what size building they're comfortable with, and that's the size.
That's it.
Yeah, sort of like, this is the size of a building, this is your box and this is your floor area ratio, and that's what you get. And then if somebody wants to do something different, then they have to come in and ask for a CPD and say, I want to do something different and this is why, and it's beneficial because.
I'm all for leaving the most options on the table as possible, because people like Albert and Patrick, that do this every day, they see things in other areas and they're the designers. They're the more ideas you have, I don't want to rule something out because you've made a decision to make it so much that you're in a box that, hey, this new design feature we can do because of new technology could really allow us to make something cool,
Mhm.
but we can't do it because this is here. Now you got to change a code again.
Yeah.
Like options. Karen?
I need to see examples of what
Yeah.
lays out visually. And I'm trying to take notes on all this and what the options would be. And I need to this was fabulous. Just to see where all the issues come into play and that type of thing. So whatever we're talking about, I think we need visuals associated with it. And I think people can understand better when they see that type of thing too.
Yeah, I think Sarah already kind of did something with the boxes, and
Yeah.
maybe now if you could just expound on that a little bit and say,
Right.
it's a square box is a square box, but this box could have this many rooms in it, or this box could have,
Mhm.
then people can. Then I think it would make a lot
Makes-
more sense.
yeah.
Scott?
I'm good. I think, yeah, we have to look, we have to look at everything. I think get in a meeting with guys like Albert and Patrick and some other developers and the town residents, because everybody has a vision.
Yeah, I think having a town hall would make sense to have the guys like you out explaining, this is what we've done, this is what we see works, what doesn't work. And then people can say, I don't like where this is going, or I love it, and help. I don't want it to be 5 people sitting here saying,
No,
we're not building anything or we're building everything.
yeah, it's got to be a balance for sure.
Vice Mayor Adderall?
I have nothing additional. Yep, good discussion.
Council King?
I'm still trying to figure out how a guy who doesn't gamble comes up with poker analogies, but other than that, I'm good.
I remember what was the one that made it popular? What was the guy's name that won the
Rounders,
but the first
Moneymaker?
World Series of Poker guy that won? He was an accountant or
it's
something.
Chris Moneymaker.
Chris Moneymaker, yeah.
Not that I play poker.
Nothing. All right, we'll move on to the next thing. Increasing the tree canopy on Fort Myers Beach. Oh, sorry, I want to make sure. Sarah, do you need anything else? Okay.
Jacob's out. You may need to load it up. Take a quick break.
Yeah, let's take a 10-minute quick break, and there's Jacob. A comfort break
Yeah.
Or a donut break.
or a donut break? Yeah.
I just took mine.
Is it hot in here? Or is it just
I
me?
can't sit more than 2 hours without
It is 11:19. Hold on. Well, maybe we'll call it back to order. Don't make me get out the mallet.
For. There we go.
Finally.
He's got the
All
power.
right. Chad? Take it
Hey,
away.
morning, everyone. Chad Schutz, environmental staff for the town. So just coming to talk to you all about opportunities to help restore the tree canopy after Hurricane Ian. Just put together some, 2020 pre and post Ian photos, different areas of the island, just to drive home how much canopy we've lost. We got put onto that tree grant with FDACS, Florida Agricultural something, the forestry grant. So we quick put together a study. Martin Pitts and the street crew and I trained them up and did some a tree survey up OSC as well as up North Estero, and just categorize them as dead trees, or they're still a live tree, no tree where there was a tree, or a tree stump was there, and did some tallies. So we had, if you add up the dead, the no, and the tree stump, it was around 54 royal palms up on North Estero, and in the OSC about 16 coconut palms, and then wasting away six sea grape trees that had just been planted by Margaritaville there, and 5 sable palms that are kind of out on the beach access. So, we got the grant, yay, $500 for a tree. Not a whole lot of money for as much as trees cost these days. We do have some.
Chad, real quick, the cost per tree, when you were talking or negotiating this, was there talks to them about potentially going all down Estero Boulevard with maybe some more of these trees to help bring that cost down?
So we can, I did talk to them about being able to plant, in all the accesses, anywhere where it's coastal, right away, beach accesses is fair game, but the most they can give us is $500 per tree, and we have to plant 75 trees.
Oh, just for the grant.
Yes, sir.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah, this is
I was
just,
just trying to figure out if there's a way to.
I'm tracking. Reduce the cost by volume.
Yeah.
yeah. So we're not, we're not limited by species. We can, mahoganies, gumbo limbos, sable palms, royal palms, sea grapes. There's thatch palms. There's a lot of different options we can go to. We do have to stay native. They won't cover the coconut palms up OSC. That was unfortunate, but we do have the 75 trees to replant North Estero and get some trees in accesses, starting with wasting away, and see where we're at. North Estero wasn't all royal palms. There was some gumbo limbos here, there, everywhere. But it was mostly, I'd say 95% royal palms. One of the questions, do we want to go all royal palms and just stay with that theme? Do we want to put some canopy trees in there like gumbo limbos, or some, smaller street trees that can survive in that kind of limited right-of-way space? There's opportunities to kind of maximize tree survivorship with like bioswales, putting in some rock to keep water, hold water, kind of plant it better. And then we have that 60-day grow-in period where we can put in water bags to try and kind of slow water them over multiple days, rather than just putting the fire hose on them for one day. And they just need that slow percolation to kind of grow in well. So I don't know if y'all have any feedback on North Estero, wasting away, other beach accesses. I know there was some great shade trees at a few of the beach accesses that you'd always see somebody underneath. There's also other things to consider, like it's easy enough to move pilings and rope and bollards for construction access, but once we plant a tree there, We're kind of saying we're not going to use that access for construction, whenever we do need beach projects. So we'll have that forward thinking in mind whenever we are planting trees. But again, just trying to get some feedback from y'all now that we do have money, and kind of getting more into the planning and implementation phase. We'll meet with FDACS, the forestry, Todd Little on July 1st to discuss the grant. So if anyone has any feedback.
I guess I'll start. I thought what was on North Estero Boulevard before the storm was perfect, in my opinion. I thought you had the shade trees, you had the low-lying bushes, the sidewalk was clearly separated from the street, but people weren't walking through it. You had the shade trees, you had the royal palm. I thought that was a perfect design. I'd love to see you recreate it.
Okay.
But Jim?
I concur. Love the royal palms. But I thought today we were also going to talk about potentially more trees all along Estero Boulevard, even in the county area, which we now have at least landscaping control of and funding for. So I'm hoping we're thinking maybe with the garden club for ideas as to how to, whatever we tried prior to the storm, I'm sure it was well intentioned, but it just wasn't very aesthetically pleasing. So if we could get, I know some areas it's pretty narrow in terms of what we have to work with, but more trees throughout Estero Boulevard would be, I don't know if you thought about that at all or thought about a strategy.
Yep, that's coming up with, there's a grant opportunity coming up that we can talk about that.
But I also think the county gave us $800,000 to landscape and maintain that area as well. So I know that's sitting in a fund somewhere as well. And I just think, as you look all along Estero, there's a desperate need for shade. There's a desperate need for a safety buffer between the cars. And so I just think it's a great opportunity. I'm not a professional landscaper, so I don't have all the answers, but I know we've got a garden club that seems very interested in helping. And so I'd love to consult with them and see if they've got some ideas for more shade. I love the north end, as the mayor said, it's great what it was, but I'd love to see that extended all the way down to Estero in some capacity.
Yep.
John?
This is more my wife's purview, so I'm okay with whatever we decide.
Karen?
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm not a huge proponent of sea grape trees. I know a lot of people love them, but I just think they're messy as can be. And we are a beach town, so the more palms and things we can look at. Color, lots of color. Yeah, without a doubt. Me, of course, the color queen. But yeah, and I loved the way the north end looked. I mean, it was fun just to walk or ride a bike along there. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it had a lot of different species and colors, and it was really cool.
Yeah.
Can you get Royal Poincianas too, or no?
So I'm not sure if they're naturalized or not.
They're on the watch list for class 2 invasive.
Right. So they're a pretty hardy tree. I think they're from Africa. I believe they are. So they're a great hardy tree. They may not qualify grant wise, but if it's our own money, we may be able to do that. But they are a big tree. You need a lot of space for those. You kind of got to plan on the order of decades for those kind of big trees.
Okay.
I thought you were going to go with the fig tree.
Fig trees are tough, especially with salt.
Yeah. Yeah. And that list that's in y'all's packet I like that list. It's IFAS. It's supposed to be all native. As Kathy was saying, was informing me some of those trees may not necessarily be 100% native or naturalized, but I thought that was useful because they do have that salt tolerance indicator in there as well that we need to, I think the trees that I'm looking at are that I would like to go forward with, just cross-referencing hurricane wind hardiness with salt tolerance and get that cross section. And I think those are going to be our winners.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, especially, we see the vegetation that didn't make it. We're just not, my fig tree didn't make it. A lot of mangoes. And
I was going to ask, sorry.
More salt resistant and more wind resistant, I think, is what we need. But to the mayor's point, what we did on the north end, if we could replicate that throughout the island, that'd be a win-win for everybody, especially if we can get the grant money.
Can I ask unanimous consent to proceed out of order? So our resident expert could maybe share some thoughts just about the rest of Estero Boulevard in terms of increasing some shade. Do you have any thoughts about that, Kathy?
I attended a presentation by the Forestry Division at Clusahassee office, and they did a presentation on trees for our neighborhoods. They included the hardy trees, which were mostly native, very large species of trees. The other concept that they brought up was the street trees. So if you've been to the Riverwalk in Tampa, they've got a lot in the pavement in there. And those are specific trees that have a limited height, they have a limited canopy, and they can tolerate a finite area to put those trees into. The Royal Palms don't qualify for a street tree. And as you get from, red coconut down to like Publix, you've got a very narrow area to plant those trees in. Otherwise, you're going to heave your sidewalk. The other issue on some of those areas, especially with all the residential homes, is some of the sight lines. So it's I gave Chad a few that I liked. Most of your native trees are not going to give you the pop of color you're looking for.
That's what I was just going to ask you. If I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I know very little to none about landscaping and trees and bushes, but I remember when I lived back in Minnesota, it was always people loved planting these annuals because they gave you a lot of color. They only made it for the year, and yes, it was more work. You had to do it again next year after the winter, but every year you could change the theme or the color.
Right.
Is that something that's done down in here in Florida?
Well, most of your annuals up north are perennials down here.
Okay.
Your native plants are less showy than your Florida-friendly plants, if you will. This grant, and most of the grants, you are restricted to native plants. But whereas the funds you have left over from Lee County, going down Estero from, in the opposite direction of the north end, you could use some of that money to buy these street trees that may give you more pop. As Chad said, the Royal Ponciana gets very, very wide. Then I worry about it's going to be over the street. People can't see to get out of their driveway, the shadows, et cetera, et cetera. But there are other lovely trees that you can get that same effect. It's going to give you a punch of color, which you're not going to get out of the majority of the native trees.
I like it.
Okay.
I like the color. I think, that Estero Boulevard is our identity.
Right.
When people come through here, that's what they see.
Yeah, and Chad's indication of the bags to get them, everything needs to be naturalized. It needs to get assimilated. It needs to be water. Even though it's native, it doesn't survive in the beginning without water. The water bags are crucial in that process. Again, the salt tolerance has to be there. The salt spray is helpful depending on where you are. You want to spend your money wisely that you can get a return investment. The native trees are smaller. They take longer to grow. So if you throw in a few Florida-friendly trees, you'll get a little bit more of a balance. And then afterwards, you get these trees established along Estero Boulevard, and then you can turn it over to the neighborhoods if they want to plant underneath them and give them that opportunity to add to the landscape.
I like it.
Okay. Any question?
When can you get started?
Yeah. We're seeing so many homes now coming out of the ground or that have been built on almost every street. And I think now is the sweet spot, if you will, to start adding some greenery along that boulevard so that, when you're coming home or when, I think it just lifts people's spirits and it makes them feel, I'm home. I'm not just staring at a sidewalk.
Well, if you guys get the funding available,
Joe?
then well, that's in that special fund that's left over from the Lee County.
That's specific for that.
We're watching that.
Yeah. I think it's $800,000.
Yeah, I think that's what's left.
Kathy, can you just opine on what we had before the storm? What was your take on that ground cover? Because it just never seemed to, and I know we didn't give it a lot of time before the storm, but it just never, there's got to be a better way, right?
I was disappointed on the landscaper and the way the project was handled. So I'm by Junkin, the old Junkanoo. We would go down to Newton Park on a walk. We watched the landscaping, and it was pretty dismally installed. And what happened from the town perspective is they had to come by and weed and fix the plantings. We actually, fixed some of the plantings. It was a horrible instance. The two species that they chose were, one's the sunshine mimosa that gets a little pink powder puff thing. The other one is perennial peanut, which is not a long-term plant down here. They were just sort of boring, but they are both native plants. There's other things to choose from. Sometimes, my opinion, we rely on the landscaper to provide the recommendations, and the landscaper's doing that within their business practice. It's not necessarily what you may get advice from a neutral third party.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I think, if we can get the garden club involved, and you guys have done a great job, and it's just a matter of putting out the bat signal and people will come to help. If,
We planted the wavy wall in Times Square. Beach Talk Radio brought us 60 volunteers. It was almost too many. And what should have been a 2-day planting, we were done in about 4 hours. So.
Well, yeah, this is, I think, a lead by the example to your point. If we start doing it down the boulevard, the neighborhoods like Fairview Isles was already proactive on wanting to do their.
Well, they did their.
Yeah, that looks great.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
To your point, all the way up and down the island, I think every neighborhood would want to get involved and start designing each, because then they can make it their own.
Yep. Thank you.
By the way,
Yes.
he's a joy to work with.
That's the first time we've ever heard that. Hey, write that down.
So we have another grant coming up. It's going to be due July 19th. So wanted to get some input from y'all. There's 4 different sections or categories. They're saying there's only $550,000 for the whole state. So I'm not sure how much money we're actually going to get out of it. You can get up to $50,000 per category per applicant, and applicants can be us. It can also be nonprofits such as the churches, and it can also be, say, the school district. There's a lot of land over there. So the first category, the tree planting. All these benefits that, come with trees. And so you want to speak to that in the application. Bioswales, there's an opportunity to work with, hopefully we're going to get the swale grant from Resilient Florida and maybe tie that into that project with trees. I talked to brief preliminary conversation with the principal over at the elementary school, Urban Orchard, just educating kids on fruit trees, and they may have a little bit of space, as well as just getting that property vegetated again. Like I said, I think there's opportunities with the churches, them being a nonprofit, and maybe just putting them on, hey, do y'all want to go after that? I mean, the Catholic Church had one of the greatest canopies on the island, and they're probably between the churches and the schools and the town are really the only properties where there's enough space to plant bigger trees with bigger canopies to improve our canopy overall as a town. Another conversation is with the neighborhoods, as you're saying, up the side streets, and we'll get into this more with the other categories, but where are there opportunities? What right-of-ways do we actually have enough space to do some of these street trees? Is it just small trees? Is it no trees? Is it maybe an opportunity for a medium-sized tree here and there? So first going into, this is the next category, inventorying. Where do we have, where do